Please subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our community and never miss a story that inspires. The air in Bayanova's top-floor boardroom was usually thick with the low thrum of ambition, the faint scent of expensive coffee, and the hushed reverence of high-stakes decisions. But on this particular morning, a different kind of energy crackled, one of casual dismissal bordering on outright contempt. It was precisely this atmosphere that made the sentence, when it came, land with the brutal force of a physical blow, a sharp, unexpected slap that ripped through the polished stillness. Miguel Alvarez, a man whose existence in these rarefied spaces was typically as inconsequential as the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams, froze mid-swish behind his mop handle. The rhythmic, almost hypnotic sigh of wet cotton on gleaming marble abruptly ceased, leaving a stark, ringing silence that seemed to amplify the words, etching them into the very fabric of the room. From his carefully cultivated vantage point, tucked strategically within the deep shadow cast by a vast, floor-to-ceiling glass partition, Miguel was a silent sentinel in a meticulously clean, navy blue uniform. He could see her with perfect clarity, Veronica Ling, the formidable CEO of Bayanova. She was a woman seemingly carved from the very essence of ambition and draped in an aura of unyielding authority. Her attire, a pristine black silk blouse that whispered against her skin, and impeccably tailored grey slacks that seemed to add inches to her already commanding height, spoke volumes of her understated power and absolute control. In her hand, she held a thick document, its pages bound with the austere, almost intimidating precision of a legal dossier. Yet, she treated it with an almost theatrical dismissiveness, brandishing it like a trivial prop in a private, sardonic comedy sketch. A smirk, a calculated blend of challenge and derision, played on her lips as she waved the document for emphasis. "Seriously, not even our lead counsel could make sense of it," she announced, her voice, usually crisp and decisive, now tinged with an undertone of exasperated amusement that betrayed a hint of her own frustration. "It's all in German technical patent language. Legal meets science. Translate this, and I'll write you a check for my salary this quarter." Her gaze, for a fleeting moment, swept across the room, encompassing her bewildered legal team and, for the briefest of instants, grazing past Miguel as if he were merely part of the furniture, an inanimate fixture. The pronouncement, clearly intended to underscore the document's impenetrable complexity and her own unshakable confidence in its untranslatability, certainly elicited the desired reaction from her inner circle. A burst of brittle, self-assured laughter erupted from the three men seated around the sprawling, polished marble conference table. Their crystal champagne flutes, still half full from an early morning celebration of some lucrative, undisclosed deal, clinked together in a brief, almost celebratory cacophony. One man, portly with jowls that shook with mirth, and adorned with a diamond pinky ring that gleamed obscenely in the soft, diffused light, whistled low and drawled, "That's $400,000. Veronica, you sure you want to lose that over a joke?" The question hung in the air, a playful challenge to her seemingly boundless confidence. Veronica, ever the picture of cool, collected confidence, simply tilted her head, a small, elegant gesture that was both defiant and alluring. "I'm not worried," she stated, her voice steady and resonant. "There's no one in this building who can translate it." Her words, meant to cement her untouchable certainty, instead struck a resonant chord, a jarring, dissonant note deep within a forgotten, long-dormant corner of Miguel's mind. Miguel, a true master of quiet observation and deliberate invisibility, merely lowered his gaze to the pristine floor. His mop, a familiar extension of his arm, resumed its practiced, silent glide across the polished hardwood. He maintained a rhythm that was almost unconscious, a meticulous dance of cleanliness. He didn't need to actually see the document. Its nature was instantly recognizable. He'd encountered 100 like it throughout his previous life, complex, dense, and intricately worded German technical patents. These were the kind of documents that inextricably wove together the cutting-edge precision of scientific engineering with the convoluted, often archaic clauses of international law and intellectual property. The inherent structure of such language, the specific, almost musical cadence of its technical jargon, was etched into his brain. It was like the indelible lyrics of a profound song he had once deeply loved, a melody that now, out of a self-imposed necessity, he tried very hard not to sing. He maintained his steady rhythm, his breath even and controlled, his face a carefully constructed mask of practiced indifference, a blank canvas that revealed nothing. "Make sure the janitorial team doesn't toss this one," Veronica added, her voice still dripping with an almost theatrical, casual carelessness as she tossed the thick document onto a minimalist side table positioned near the gleaming, espresso machine-adorned coffee bar. It might be worth something eventually. The implied triviality of the document, and by extension, of the janitorial staff who might handle it, hung in the air, a subtle insult delivered without malice, simply out of habit. Miguel didn't flinch, didn't overtly react in any way that would betray his internal tremor. His gaze remained fixed on the flawless floor he was meticulously cleaning. But beneath the surface of his calm, almost robotic exterior, his hand, gripping the mop handle with a silent intensity, had gone white at the knuckles. The casual offer, the almost insulting challenge, casually thrown into the sterile air of corporate indifference, resonated within him. It was a dissonant chord, striking a sensitive nerve in the carefully constructed symphony of his quiet, unassuming existence. He pushed his cleaning cart past the edge of the room. The faint squeak of its wheels, usually a minor irritant, now a welcome distraction, swallowed by the plush carpet of the adjacent hallway. He rounded the corner with practiced efficiency, his silhouette fading from view. Only when the heavy, soundproof door to the boardroom swung shut behind him, effectively muffling the lingering waves of laughter and the clinking of glasses, did he allow himself to stop. His breath, which he realized he had been unconsciously holding, came out slowly, evenly, a conscious effort to steady the sudden, unexpected tremor that had seized his chest. He reached into his back pocket, retrieving the worn, utilitarian cloth he always carried, and meticulously wiped his hands. The rough fabric was a small, grounding sensation against his calloused palms, anchoring him firmly to the present moment, away from the echoes of his past. Then, with a swift, furtive glance to confirm the hallway was utterly empty as silent, empty corridor bathed in the soft glow of recessed lighting, he turned back. His movements were quiet, almost spectral, as he ghosted back into the opulent boardroom, a place where he was meant to be invisible. The document, lying innocently on the side table, seemed to hum with a latent, forgotten power. He picked it up. Its familiar weight in his hand was strangely comforting, a tactile echo from a brilliant past life he had tried so assiduously to forget. Downstairs, in the stark, unembellished reality of the janitor's locker room, the overhead fluorescent lights hummed with a cold, unforgiving glow, illuminating every scuff mark on the linoleum floor, every scratch on the metal lockers. Miguel sat alone on a worn wooden bench, the thick document splayed open across his lap. The air in the room was a pungent, almost industrial mix of pine cleaner, warm plastic from the mop bucket, and stale coffee, a stark, olfactory contrast to the expensive perfumes and polished woods of the executive suite above. His eyes, usually softened by the quiet exhaustion of his night shifts, now sharpened with an almost surgical intensity as they scanned each page. He noted the meticulously handwritten annotations in the margins, the complex diagrams of biochemical sequences, the obscure yet crucial references to specific EU data security regulations. It was all there, a dense tapestry of specialized knowledge, a language understood only by a select, highly trained few, a language he had once effortlessly mastered, a language that was now pulling him back into a world he had abandoned. It was worse, far worse than he had initially feared. A particular clause, strategically buried deep within the convoluted text on page 3, cleverly camouflaged within the verbose, technical prose, granted the German partner not just access, but unrestricted back-end access to Bionova's entire client genome database. This wasn't a minor oversight or a simple misinterpretation. It was a direct, brazen violation of HIPAA Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, a catastrophic breach of privacy that could utterly shatter the company's reputation, invite unprecedented legal ramifications, and potentially destroy the lives of countless individuals. Another section, equally insidious and meticulously worded, effectively constituted a complete surrender of the intellectual property rights for any co-developed genetic mapping software. This was corporate sabotage, dressed up as a benign partnership agreement. He exhaled slowly through his nose, a soft, almost inaudible sound of profound disbelief and simmering frustration. "They didn't read this," he muttered, his voice hoarse, a barely audible whisper in the silent room. "They couldn't have." The sheer negligence was staggering. He ran a calloused thumb, rough from years of manual labor, over the elegant, embossed Bionova logo in the corner of the page, a cruel irony. This was the symbol of the company he now served in the quiet shadows, a company oblivious to the imminent disaster its own leadership had almost invited through oversight or, perhaps, something far more sinister. It had been precisely 10 years since he last translated a document of this intricate complexity, 10 years since he had deliberately walked away from the hallowed lecture halls of academia, 10 years since he had consciously abandoned his name, his published works, and his intellectual legacy in prestigious academic journals, choosing instead to become a ghost an anonymous figure in a navy blue uniform. Footsteps, distant at first, then growing louder, echoed outside the locker room, signaling an imminent intrusion, a disruption to his clandestine work. Miguel's practiced instincts, honed by years of avoiding notice, kicked in immediately. With a swift, economical motion, he folded the contract, its delicate paper now feeling like a heavy burden, and slid it into his worn backpack. He stood, his movements fluid and silent, the scholar vanishing back into the janitor. The past, however urgent its demands, had to remain a carefully guarded secret. He had one more floor to clean, a routine that, for now, offered him anonymity and a semblance of control, a shield against his own formidable intellect. The city above, still largely asleep, remained blissfully oblivious to the quiet, intellectual drama unfolding within the gleaming, unsuspecting walls of Bayanova. It was precisely 2:15 am when he finally inserted his key into the lock of his modest apartment in Little Village, a vibrant, working-class neighborhood situated just west of downtown Chicago world, both economically and culturally, away from Bayanova's gleaming, impersonal towers. The apartment, small but meticulously kept, was his sanctuary, a physical manifestation of his carefully constructed quiet life. His daughter, Camilla, a soft, ethereal presence, was already asleep on the pull-out couch in the living room. One arm dangled innocently off the edge, her open sketchbook lying beside her, its pages filled with the vibrant, uninhibited dreams of a child. Miguel paused, performing a tender, nightly ritual, to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather light, filled with an unspoken love and a fierce protectiveness. In the dim, comforting glow of the kitchen light, he brewed a fresh pot of strong coffee, the familiar, grounding aroma a welcome comfort in the quiet, pre-dawn hours. He sat at the chipped formica table, its surface scarred with years of honest use, and pulled out his old laptop. It was a relic, a piece of technology he hadn't touched, hadn't even thought about, since he had abruptly left his esteemed position as a professor at the University of Texas. The tinny, almost forgotten startup chime felt like a memory resurrected, a faint whisper from a brilliant life long past. He dug through a cluttered drawer and retrieved a cracked leather notebook, his old lexicon journal. Inside, meticulously preserved, were notes he'd taken on intricate dialect shifts, arcane patent language, and nuanced EU compliance terms, all meticulously transcribed in 3 different languages, a silent, powerful testament to a brilliance he had long, consciously suppressed for the sake of his family. And then, in the profound quiet of the early morning, with the city utterly asleep outside his window, Miguel began to translate. The words, once buried deep in his subconscious, now flowed from his fingers, a silent torrent of reawakened understanding, bridging the vast chasm between 2 complex, seemingly disparate worlds. Each sentence, each carefully chosen phrase, was not just a translation. It was a deliberate step back into a past he had sworn to abandon, a past that now, unbidden and undeniably, demanded to be acknowledged. He wasn't merely translating words. He was meticulously uncovering a truth that lay deeply hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed legal obfuscation, a truth that held the power to either save or irrevocably destroy the company that unknowingly employed him as its silent guardian. The night wore on, illuminated only by the laptop's steady glow and the quiet, focused hum of his concentration. For a few precious, stolen hours, Miguel Alvarez was not a janitor. He was, once again, a scholar, a brilliant linguist, a vigilant guardian of unseen words, meticulously weaving a tapestry of clarity from the tangled threads of deception. His old self, the Dr. Alvarez of academia, was resurrecting in the quiet hum of his laptop, driven by an ethical imperative that transcended his current station. The next morning, Bayanova emerged from the last vestiges of night, an imposing edifice of glass and polished steel that seemed to absorb and then radiate the soft, pre-dawn light. Its geometric facade shimmered faintly as the sun began its slow ascent over Lake Michigan. Every pane of glass, from the vast, welcoming expanses of the ground floor lobby to the secluded, exclusive executive suites on the 42nd floor, had been buffed and polished to an almost liquid sheen during the night. Every hallway, usually a bustling thoroughfare filled with the hurried footsteps and hushed conversations of ambitious employees, was eerily silent in its early-hour tranquility, imbued with the crisp, clean scent of the night's meticulous labor. Miguel's labor. He moved through it like a ghost, a familiar yet utterly unnoticed presence among the handful of early risers already trickling in, their faces still etched with the weariness of the nascent day. His heart, usually a steady, quiet drumbeat of routine, now held a faint, almost imperceptible tremor, a residue of the clandestine intellectual marathon he had run the previous night. In his hand, tightly held and almost sacred, was a sealed, pristine white envelope. It wasn't merely a physical object. It was the culmination of hours of intense focus, a bridge between two worlds. Inside, nestled securely, was not just the meticulously typed translation of the treacherous German patent document, now stripped of its linguistic camouflage and laid bare in precise, unambiguous English, but also a concise, one-page executive summary. This summary painstakingly outlined its damning legal implications, rendering the complex legal jargon into an urgent, undeniable warning. He had deliberately chosen to keep his contribution anonymous, a calculated act of both self-preservation and ethical defiance. There was no signature, no proud note of authorship, no attempt to claim credit. Just the unvarnished truth, presented with surgical precision and irrefutable clarity, a silent testament to his unyielding principles. He walked past the gleaming security turnstiles, his identification badge a silent, almost ironic key to his daily routine, and approached the internal document drop a sleek, polished slot in the wall, subtly marked Legal, Confidential. With a subtle, almost reverent motion, a gesture that contained a world of suppressed knowledge, he slid the envelope through the slot. It landed with a soft, almost dismissive thud, instantly swallowed by the impersonal maw of corporate bureaucracy. The truth, in its most potent and potentially dangerous form, had been delivered, utterly devoid of fanfare or self-promotion, a quiet bombshell placed anonymously in the hands of the unsuspecting. As Miguel walked past the reception desk, heading towards the employee exit his shift, nearing its end the elevator doors near the executive wing chimed softly, opening with a barely audible sigh. Veronica Ling stepped out, her posture radiating controlled urgency, her expression already sharp with the demands of the day. She was flanked by two legal advisors whose faces were already etched with the strain of early morning strategizing, their briefcases clutched tightly. Her heels clicked sharply on the polished marble floor, each step a precise punctuation mark of her authority and barely contained impatience. Her eyes, sharp, intelligent, and perpetually scanning, swept across the expansive lobby, taking in every detail with an almost predatory efficiency. They landed on him for a fleeting moment, the janitor, pushing his cart laden with cleaning supplies, a blur of navy blue against the gleaming, impersonal backdrop. There was the slightest flicker of recognition in her gaze, a momentary pause, quickly followed by an almost imperceptible dismissal, as if he were merely background noise, a fixed, uninteresting fixture of the building's ecosystem, no more significant than the potted plants that adorned the lobby. Miguel dipped his head respectfully, a practiced gesture of acknowledgement that required no reciprocity, a silent bow to the unspoken hierarchy. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't offer even the slightest nod in return, and that was perfectly fine. He wasn't doing it for her recognition, or for anyone's applause or commendation. His motivation was far more profound, rooted in an ethical imperative that transcended personal gain. He was doing it because silence, in this critical case, would have been a betrayal of his deepest principles, a compromise of the intellectual integrity he had cultivated over a lifetime, even if that life was now largely hidden. That evening, as he walked Camilla home from school, the last rays of sunlight painting long, ephemeral shadows on the sidewalk, she skipped beside him, her small backpack bouncing rhythmically with each carefree step. The weight of the day, the quiet tension of his morning delivery, the internal debate about his anonymity, the subtle anxieties of maintaining his double life lifted slightly in her innocent, vibrant presence. Her laughter, like tiny bells, chimed in the cooling air. "Dad," she asked suddenly, her voice bright and clear, cutting through the mundane sounds of the city. "Do you ever wish you were still a teacher?" The question, so simple, yet so profound in its directness, pierced through his carefully constructed defenses, momentarily taking him by surprise and stirring a deep well of memory. Miguel smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that softened the lines around his eyes and reached his quiet, steadfast heart. "I was never just a teacher, mija. I was your mom's husband, and now I'm your dad. That's more than enough." He watched as she processed his words, her small brow furrowed in thoughtful contemplation, her expression a mirror of her mother's inquisitive nature. Camilla wrinkled her nose, still pondering, undeterred by his philosophical reply. "But you're really smart." It was a statement of fact, not a question, delivered with the unwavering conviction of a child who saw her father through unfiltered, adoring eyes, unburdened by the world's definitions. He chuckled, a warm, resonant sound that eased the last remnants of his internal tension, a rare, unforced laugh. "Being smart doesn't mean I have to stand in front of a class, Mija. Sometimes, the smartest thing you can do is know when to be quiet and when not to." The words, spoken lightly, carried a hidden depth, a veiled reference to the morning's silent act, a philosophical underpinning to his deliberate anonymity, a quiet defense of his chosen path. She tilted her head, her curiosity piqued, her bright eyes reflecting the lingering daylight, a tiny scholar in the making. "Is that one of your old professor sayings?" Miguel stopped walking. The busy street sounds the distant traffic, the chatter of other parents and children fading into a muted background, suddenly feeling the weight of the moment, the profound significance of this conversation. He looked at her seriously, his gaze direct and unwavering, stripping away any pretense, allowing a glimpse into his true self. "No," he said, his voice low and firm, imbued with a newfound gravitas that surprised even himself. "That's a janitor saying." And for the first time in a long time, he meant it with an intensity that resonated through his entire being. It was a truth forged in the quiet observation of years, a profound wisdom gathered in the shadows of unseen labor, a lesson learned far from any lecture hall. The bus hissed to a stop in front of Camilla's school the next morning, releasing a stream of bustling children into the brisk morning air. Miguel stepped down, clutching the brown paper bag containing her lunch, a carefully packed sandwich, an apple, and a small surprise, a second-hand set of watercolor pencils she'd been eyeing through the bookstore window last weekend, a small luxury saved for. He adjusted the collar of his jacket, pulling it tighter against the chill. The city was waking up around him, a cacophony of horns blaring, tires rolling across wet pavement, voices rising on sidewalks. It all sounded distant, muted, as if he were listening from behind a pane of thick glass, the external world indistinct. His mind, however, was not distant. It was still caught in the intricate, dangerous web of the document he had translated overnight, the insidious clauses that kept replaying like a warning bell in his chest, a constant thrum of anxiety and ethical responsibility. Inside the school, the cheerful chaos of children running down the hallway did little to dispel the lingering tension within him. He spotted Camilla at her locker, her small frame partially obscured by a cluster of classmates. She was pushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a familiar gesture. Miguel slowed his pace, instinctively anticipating a moment, and caught sight of her face just as one of the boys, a boisterous kid with a shock of messy brown hair and a cruel streak, laughed and said, too loudly for a private conversation, "That's Camilla. Her dad's the janitor at Bayanova. He probably cleans toilets with a dictionary." A few kids chuckled, their innocent cruelty fueled by herd mentality and a profound lack of imagination or empathy. Miguel's hand tightened around the brown paper bag, the fragile surprise inside momentarily forgotten, replaced by a surge of protective anger. Camilla's eyes darted toward him, a flash of vulnerability, a silent plea that tore at his heart. But she didn't cry, didn't even flinch. Instead, she turned to the boy, her small frame radiating an unexpected composure and a quiet strength that belied her years. "My dad speaks 5 languages," she said calmly, clearly, her voice cutting through the snickers with a sharp, undeniable edge. "How many do you speak when you're not hiding behind your mom?" Silence. A profound, uncomfortable silence descended. The boy blinked, momentarily stunned by her unexpected retort, his smug expression crumbling. The other kids shuffled their feet, suddenly uncomfortable, the laughter dying on their lips, replaced by nervous glances. Miguel stepped forward, just in time to hear a teacher calling the kids into class, a timely interruption that spared both sides further confrontation and offered Camilla an exit. Camilla turned back to her locker, her expression now unreadable, a carefully constructed mask mirroring his own stoicism. He crouched beside her, his heart swelling with a mixture of immense pride and a familiar, fierce protective ache. "I brought your lunch," he said, placing the bag gently in her hands. "And something extra." Camilla opened the top, her fingers brushing the crisp paper, still warm from his touch. When she saw the pencils, her eyes widened just a little, a tiny spark of pure, unadulterated joy illuminating her face. "You remembered?" "Of course," Miguel smiled, his voice soft, full of warmth and love. "You're my favorite artist." She looked down at the pencils, tracing the vibrant colors with her finger, then asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper, imbued with a depth beyond her years, "Why didn't you tell them what you used to do?" The question, so direct, so earnest, resonated with a deep understanding of his unspoken past, a child's wisdom. "Because it's not about what I used to do, Misha," he replied, his voice firm but gentle, conveying a profound, personal truth. "It's about who I still am." He straightened up, the janitor once again, fully embodying his current role, his past a hidden jewel. "And today, I'm the guy who's late for his second job. Camilla smiled, just faintly, a knowing glimmer in her eyes, a shared secret and understanding passing between them. Thanks, Dad. The unspoken understanding between them was a bond stronger than any words, a quiet affirmation of his choices, a silent pact of love and respect. Later that evening, Miguel stood behind the stove in their small kitchen, stirring a pot of lentil soup. The comforting scent of cumin and garlic settled around him like a warm memory, a fragrant reminder of a past he cherished, of a life he had shared. The soft scratch of Camilla's pencil against paper filled the room. She was drawing again, lost in her artistic world, a world he encouraged and protected. It had been weeks since she'd truly touched her sketchbook, a testament to the lingering anxieties of the school year that often overshadowed her vibrant creative spirit. He leaned against the counter, letting the familiar aroma settle, and his thoughts drifted, as they often did, to Sophia, his late wife. He remembered the way she used to hum while chopping vegetables, a quiet, melodic sound that was the vibrant soundtrack to their life together in Austin. She had been the dreamer, the artist, the vibrant, irrepressible spark in their tiny apartment. When she passed 11 years ago, something in Miguel broke, not in a violent rage or a dramatic collapse, but in a profound, internal silence, like a crucial page ripped cleanly from a book no one would ever finish reading. He had walked away from everything, his coveted lectureships, his cutting-edge research, his pending promotion to a distinguished chair. His students had called him Dr. Alvarez, a title of profound respect and intellectual prowess. Now, even his name had faded, dissolved into the mop water and the anonymity of his navy blue uniform. But he never regretted it, not truly. Not when he tucked Camilla into bed each night, her small hand clinging to his, a fragile anchor in the darkness. Not when she whispered his name in her sleep, a soft, innocent plea. Still, tonight, after the document, after that brazen, careless line from Veronica Lean, translate this, and my salary is yours, the weight of it pressed harder than usual. It was a reminder of a world he had forsaken, a challenge he had silently, unexpectedly answered, and the quiet, potentially seismic impact it might have on his carefully constructed anonymity. He served the soup, the warm steam rising, then sat across from Camilla at their small, chipped formica table. She dipped a spoon into her bowl, then looked up, her bright eyes assessing him with an uncanny perceptiveness, a reflection of her mother's intuition. "You okay?" Miguel chuckled softly, a genuine sound that eased the last knots of his day, a subtle relief that she saw beyond his facade. "You've been watching me since you were 3. Of course you know." "I heard what Miss Tam said on the phone," she admitted, her voice low, a conspiratorial whisper, referencing the school secretary, a well-meaning but often gossipy woman. "Something about a contract." He paused, stirring his soup, choosing his words carefully, navigating the delicate balance of truth and protection. "It's complicated." Camilla nodded, accepting his brevity, wise beyond her years, a silent confidante. "You don't have to tell me, but if it's like a good complicated, then I'm glad." Her innocent perspective always managed to cut through his adult anxieties, finding the hopeful core. Miguel studied her, this child who had inherited her mother's sharp, insightful eyes and his own quiet, compassionate heart. Then he said, his voice thoughtful, tinged with a deep, personal history that had long been unspoken. "Have I ever told you why I stopped teaching?" Camilla shook her head, listening intently, sensing the significance of the moment, the unfolding of a long-held secret. "It wasn't because I got tired of it. I loved it. The books, the languages, the students, the thrill of discovery, the intellectual chase." "Then why?" she asked, her gaze unwavering, patient, demanding the full truth. He stirred his soup, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic bowl, the sound punctuating his introspection. "Because when your mom got sick, I realized something profoundly important. Being the smartest man in the room means nothing, absolutely nothing, if the people you love are hurting, and you're not there to be with them. So I chose to be there." His voice dropped, thick with memory and emotion, a raw honesty that shimmered in the quiet room. "Some days I miss it, mija. The work, the lectures, the whiteboard full of words only 3 people in the building could understand, the intellectual sparring." He paused, a wistful silence filling the small kitchen, heavier than the cumin-scented steam. "But you're worth every word I never got to say, every single one." The profound truth of his sacrifice, whispered in the quiet intimacy of their home, hung in the air, a powerful, unwavering testament to his enduring love. This simple, profound declaration was the heart of his existence, the reason he had chosen invisibility and peace over recognition and academic glory. It was the foundation of who he was, and who he always would be. The last vestiges of the city's nocturnal hum had long since faded into the deepest hours of the night. Miguel sat alone at the kitchen table, the only sound the soft, rhythmic breathing of Camilla from the pull-out couch in the living room. She was lost in the innocent, dream-filled depths of sleep, her small body a comforting silhouette in the dimness. The apartment, a sanctuary from the relentless demands of his double life, was quiet, imbued with the lingering scent of lentil soup and the faint, sweet aroma of Camilla's watercolors. The translated document, now a sealed, innocuous-looking envelope, lay on the counter, a silent harbinger of change, poised for its final journey into Bayanova's anonymous drop box. He reached for his journal again, not the cracked leather bound with linguistic complexities, but the softer, more personal one, a quiet confidante he had begun after Sophia's passing, a private space for his unspoken thoughts and the profound echoes of his grief. He flipped to a blank page, its crisp white surface patiently awaiting his words. He picked up his pen, a simple, utilitarian ballpoint that felt familiar and grounding in his calloused fingers, and meticulously recorded the date, March 12th. Below it, he began to write, his hand moving with a practiced, almost academic precision that belied his current profession. Translated the document. 30 pages, 28,000 words, one clause that could have destroyed the company. They laughed. I listened. The words flowed, a silent catharsis. He paused, the pen hovering for a thoughtful moment, then added, his voice internally resonating with a quiet strength. Tomorrow I'll return to being invisible. But tonight, I remembered who I used to be. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. He closed the journal, the soft thud a definitive period at the end of a long, unspoken sentence. The apartment settled back into profound silence, save for Camilla's soft, even breathing. She had fallen asleep on the couch again, curled almost perfectly beside her drawing, a vibrant splash of color in the dim light, a symbol of resilient hope. Miguel stood and turned off the kitchen light, plunging the room into deeper shadow. But before he did, he looked once more at the envelope on the counter, a quiet challenge gleaming in the darkness. Then, almost a whisper, a promise delivered to the empty room, he said, "Let's see if they're still laughing tomorrow." The words hung in the air, a prophecy already set in motion, destined to unfold in the gleaming towers above. At 5:53 am, the sprawling metropolis of Chicago was still largely dressed in the deep, ink-high shadows of pre-dawn, the magnificent skyline of glass and steel dimmed by the last, reluctant breath of night. Miguel stood beneath the soft, ambient glow of Bayanova's grand glass atrium, the anonymous envelope clutched firmly in his hand. The polished marble floor beneath his worn shoes was spotless, a pristine expanse that gleamed under the subtle lighting, a testament to his own meticulous labor, for he had cleaned it himself 100 times over, knowing every crevice and curve. But this morning, despite its familiarity, it felt like unfamiliar ground, charged with an almost palpable tension that hummed beneath the surface. He hesitated for a fleeting moment at the internal document drop, a sleek, impersonal slot in the wall labeled Legal, Confidential, a silent debate playing out in the quiet chambers of his mind. The temptation to sign his name, to reclaim a piece of his lost identity, was potent. But the lessons of his past, the fragility of a life built on vulnerability, held him firm. Then, with a decisive push, a gesture imbued with both resolve and anonymity, he slid the envelope through the slot. It landed with a soft, final thud, a quiet surrender, instantly swallowed by the impersonal bureaucracy of the corporate labyrinth. No signature, no name, just his words and the potent, undeniable truth they contained. He exhaled slowly, a long, quiet release of breath, a silent acknowledgement of an act that could either be ignored or ignite a firestorm. Back to work, he whispered to himself, the simple mantra of his chosen life, a shield against the ghosts of his academic past. Upstairs, on floor 42, the exclusive executive level was already buzzing with an early, almost palpable tension, a subtle shift in the corporate atmosphere that even the uninitiated could sense. Veronica Ling stepped into the executive boardroom at precisely 7:08 and her presence was as commanding as ever. A black ceramic coffee mug clutched securely in one hand, a sleek, minimalist tablet in the other, her designer heels clicking like sharp, precise punctuation marks on the polished wooden floor. The document was already on the vast mahogany table, neatly translated and thoroughly annotated, its pages starkly revealed under the boardroom's powerful recessed lighting. Beside it, a single, crisp one-page executive summary lay flat, its contents clear, concise, and utterly damning in its implications. She stared at it for a long moment, her expression unreadable, a practiced mask of controlled composure. The boardroom was empty save for Derek Lang, the head of legal affairs, a man usually unflappable and radiating self-assurance, but now visibly shaken. He had called her as soon as he found the mysterious envelope, his voice tight with alarm. "You're saying this came in anonymously?" she asked, her voice low, a controlled query that betrayed nothing of her internal assessment, yet carried a razor-sharp edge. Lang nodded, his usual confidence replaced by a subtle, unsettling unease. His eyes were wide, almost incredulous. "No ID, no submission code, just this." He slid the summary closer to her, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly as he relinquished the document. Veronica began to read silently, her eyes rapidly absorbing the dense information, her expression remaining a blank slate of concentration. Then, her gaze locked onto the clause Miguel had marked with a bold, emphatic red underline: full technical access to genomic sequence data from all North American clients. Her head snapped up sharply, her eyes suddenly piercing, fixing Lang with an intense stare. "You're telling me we almost signed away unrestricted access to our entire client genome database, Derek? Our most sensitive, proprietary information?" The question was less a query and more a statement of profound, dangerous disbelief, edged with a dawning fury. Lang pressed his lips together, his face grim, a testament to the gravity of the situation. "Yes, and the clause was buried deep within incredibly dense, convoluted language. Veronica. Our in-house team flagged issues minor red flags, ambiguities, but this version, this translation, it's surgical, forensically precise. It dissects the original with a level of understanding that goes far beyond mere linguistic conversion." He gestured helplessly at the one-page summary, acknowledging its undeniable power. Veronica tapped the page with a manicured fingernail, the sound sharp and rhythmic in the quiet room, echoing the rapid pulse in her own temples. "This isn't AI translated. This is human work, Derek, and not just any human. This required deep understanding. Whoever did this knows not only the language, the highly specialized German technical legal jargon, but also the stakes involved. The implications for our biosecurity, for our client trust, for the very future of Bionova." Lang hesitated, a hint of apprehension in his voice, sensing the dangerous waters they were now treading. "Should we try to trace who?" She cut him off with a decisive shake of her head, her mind already racing, connecting dots at a speed that left him struggling to keep up, weighing consequences far beyond his immediate concern. "No, not yet. We contain this first. Then we find out who." By 8:30 am, a subtle, unsettling hum had started to spread through the hushed, impeccably maintained corridors of Bionova, a ripple effect from the quiet, anonymous bomb that had landed in the legal department. In the internal legal Slack channel, a digital conversation was brewing, a torrent of frantic, amazed messages. Someone typed, "Has anyone seen the translation that came in this morning? It's a masterpiece. Saved us from walking into a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit and a PR nightmare." Another replied almost immediately, the digital equivalent of a stunned whisper. "Honestly, this is above our pay grade. I ran it through 2 cross-checks with our best software. No errors. 0. Whoever did this knows more about German biotech law than half our senior team combined. It's terrifyingly brilliant." The anonymous translator was already becoming a legend, a phantom figure whose undeniable brilliance was threatening to unravel the carefully curated image of the company's internal expertise. At 9:02 am, Miguel was meticulously scrubbing the base of a floor-to-ceiling window wall in the ground floor lounge, his movements precise and economical, a ballet of efficiency. The sunlight, now bright and warm, streamed in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. He was lost in the rhythm of his work when the assistant building manager, a burly, good-natured man named Frank, stopped him. Frank, usually preoccupied with facility logistics, had an uncharacteristic tension in his shoulders. "Hey, Miguel, you were working last night, right? Late shift?" Miguel straightened up slowly, his heart giving a cautious, internal thump. He kept his face neutral, his gaze steady, betraying nothing of the churning beneath. "Yeah. Why?" Frank shrugged, seemingly unfazed by Miguel's calm demeanor, or perhaps too caught up in his own concerns to notice. "There was a document left in Legal Confidential this morning. Caused quite a stir. Some important people are looking into it. Thought maybe you saw someone unusual, loitering around the executive floors." Miguel shook his head, a practiced, convincing gesture honed by years of avoiding scrutiny. Just empty halls and old gum on the carpet. Frank, the usual suspects. Nothing new. He offered a small, disarming smile, a touch of easygoing charm. The manager chuckled, seemingly accepting his reply without further thought. Yeah, figured. All good. Thanks, man. He turned and walked away, his attention already shifting to another urgent corporate demand. Miguel went back to scrubbing, his heart quiet but steady, the adrenaline receding, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. He didn't want thanks. He wanted impact. He wanted the truth to surface, to protect the company he served, however humbly, and to avert a disaster that could have ripple effects far beyond Bionova itself. His anonymity was his most potent weapon, and his silence his greatest strength. That evening, back home, the setting sun painted the small apartment in hues of amber and rose. Camilla sat at the kitchen table, completely lost in her artistic world, painting a vibrant fox amidst a watercolor forest. The gentle, rhythmic sound of her brush on paper was a balm to his soul, a melody of innocent creation. Miguel watched her, a tender smile playing on his lips, then turned his eyes to the city outside their window. A sprawling panorama now coming alive with a distant wail of sirens, the ceaseless flow of headlights, and the indistinct, throbbing pulse of millions of lives. "You okay, Dad?" Camilla asked, her intuitive perception piercing his quiet introspection without even looking up from her canvas. He nodded, a soft sigh escaping him, a release of the day's accumulated tension. "Just thinking." She blew gently on her painting, drying the delicate wash of color, her concentration absolute. "About the contract?" she queried, her voice soft but knowing. Miguel smiled faintly, a genuine warmth spreading through him. "How do you always know, Mija?" "You get quiet when you do something brave," she replied, her voice soft but certain, her brush still dancing across the paper. "Not nervous quiet, brave quiet." Her words, simple yet profound, articulated an observation Miguel had never consciously acknowledged in himself. He paused, caught completely off guard by her phrasing, by the startling insight of his daughter. Brave quiet. The words resonated deeply within him, a revelation. She nodded, confirming her observation, her eyes still on her artwork. "Like right before you helped me tell the teacher I wanted to switch art classes. You didn't say much, but you held my hand, and it made me feel strong, like I could do anything." Miguel's throat tightened with emotion, a sudden lump forming, a powerful surge of love and gratitude. You get quiet when you do something brave. He hadn't realized it showed, hadn't understood that his internal landscape, his quiet courage, was so transparent, so beautifully understood by her. It was a revelation, both humbling and deeply moving, a confirmation that his true self, however hidden, was still seen by the one who mattered most. Meanwhile, miles away on floor 42, Veronica Ling sat alone in her expansive, minimalist office, the last sliver of the sun bleeding fiery orange into the glass horizon, painting the sky with impossible, dramatic hues. She clicked through files on her sleek tablet screen, each one labeled Munich Agreement, German Draft, her expression grim. The anonymous translation lay open beside her, a stark counterpoint. The deeper she read, meticulously cross-referencing against the original German and the detailed, one-page summary, the clearer and more chilling it became. If they had signed that original version, Bionova would have forfeited far more than just intellectual property rights and revenue. They would have been exposed to a catastrophic cascade of regulatory violations, crippling class action lawsuits, and an irreversible public backlash that could have crippled the company for years, perhaps even leading to its demise. Someone had saved them silently, completely, without taking a single shred of credit. She remembered the janitor walking past that morning, the one with the quiet eyes, the one who never spoke unless spoken to. Could it be? The thought, initially dismissed as too far-fetched, too improbable, now clung to her mind like a burr, refusing to be dislodged. Something a nagging intuition, a persistent thread of connection, perhaps just the lingering echo of his silent dignity wouldn't let it go. The image of his stoic, almost invisible presence lingered, an incongruous puzzle piece in the high-stakes game of corporate espionage and oversight. At 10:43 p.m., Miguel was finishing his rounds on the executive floors. The halls were still, deserted, bearing the quiet remains of another corporate day. Forgotten coffee cups on gleaming surfaces, conference room chairs askew, half-open blinds casting long, spectral shadows across pristine carpets. He paused by the same side table where Veronica had so carelessly tossed the German document the night before. The champagne glasses were long gone, the laughter silenced, the contract gone too. but its ghost remained, not forgotten. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his leather notebook, the personal one, now a repository of his reawakened spirit. Flipping to the last page, he wrote, his pen scratching softly in the profound silence. They laughed. But the truth didn't care who laughed. It only needed someone willing to say it. He closed the notebook, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over him, a small victory in a world that rarely acknowledged such triumphs. He turned off the lights, plunging the empty boardroom into total darkness, and walked on, his footsteps echoing softly down the silent corridor, a lone sentinel in the sleeping corporate giant. The first ripples of his silent act were beginning to spread, unseen but undeniable, slowly, inexorably, shifting the currents of power and perception within Bionova. The quiet hero had made his move, and the world was about to change. The boardroom on Bionova's 42nd floor, usually a theater of confident pronouncements and strategic maneuvers, felt palpably colder than usual that morning. It wasn't a drop in temperature, but an atmosphere of subtle unease that pervaded the space, making everyone sit a little straighter, speak a little quieter, and glance nervously around, as though daring someone else to voice the collective anxiety first. The early spring sunlight, usually a welcome golden wash that streamed through the panoramic windows, now cast sharp, uncompromising lines across the polished mahogany table, starkly dividing the perceived zones of power from a creeping, undeniable sense of panic. Veronica Ling stood at the head of the table, her figure commanding attention even in stillness, her fingers lightly resting on the armrest of her leather chair. It was a posture of controlled authority, meticulously chosen to mask a furious internal churning beneath her composed exterior. Her gaze, sharp and analytical, swept across the assembled executives' legal heads, division directors, and the CFO, each face a carefully constructed mask of professional concern. "I want to make this very clear," she began, her voice controlled but firm, each word delivered with the precision of a surgeon. "Had we signed that agreement yesterday, we would have violated 3 federal statutes and handed over proprietary technology worth hundreds of millions, potentially billions, when considering the long-term impact on our genomic data and the subsequent litigation." A profound, almost suffocating hush settled over the room, heavier than the plush carpet underfoot, amplifying the gravity of her words. The CFO, Gordon Hale, a portly man whose placid demeanor usually only cracked when discussing disastrous quarterly losses, cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. His brow was furrowed with genuine alarm. "So, who caught it?" he asked, his voice strained, a raw edge of desperation cutting through his usual corporate smooth talk. "Our in-house team flagged a few issues. Yes, minor ambiguities at best. But this level of detail. This is surgical. Forensically precise. Who was it?" Veronica paused, her eyes narrowing imperceptibly. She didn't want to answer that question because, maddeningly, she didn't know. The anonymous nature of the submission was both a blessing preventing an immediate internal power struggle and a curse, as it kept the source of this profound insight hidden. "I don't have a name," she replied, her gaze sweeping across the bewildered faces, challenging each one to offer an explanation. The translation was submitted anonymously. "But whoever they are, they understand legal German, European data law, and the genomic implications better than half the consultants we've hired at exorbitant rates to advise us on this very matter." The room murmured, a low, unsettling drone of disbelief and growing alarm, a collective realization of their own near-catastrophic oversight. Then, from the corner, Derek Lang, head of legal affairs, a man who prided himself on his legal acumen, spoke slowly, his usual self-assured confidence completely eroded, replaced by a deep unease. "You think we have someone on payroll who's just hiding that level of expertise? That kind of genius?" Veronica's gaze narrowed further, a flinty glint in her eyes that cut through the fear. "I don't think they're hiding, Derek. I think we just never thought to look. We never bothered to see." Her words were a stinging indictment, a stark acknowledgement of the corporate blindness, the inherent biases that had almost brought them to the brink of ruin. The uncomfortable silence that followed was thick with unspoken recrimination and dawning self-awareness. Downstairs, utterly oblivious to the executive-level maelstrom his silent act had unleashed, Miguel was engaged in the methodical ritual of mopping the entrance to the south lobby. His eyes were focused, his movements precise and economical, a fluid dance of efficiency he had perfected over a decade of dedicated, unseen labor. He didn't need to look up to know who had entered the lobby. He felt it. He felt it in the subtle hush that followed her heels, the brief, deferential pause of the security guard glancing up. the almost imperceptible change in air pressure as people instinctively cleared her path. Veronica Ling. He didn't flinch, didn't break his rhythm, just finished the precise square of floor he was working on, wrung the mop out carefully, and pushed the cart toward the janitor's closet. He was almost there when her voice, unexpectedly close and resonant, cut through the ambient hum of the lobby, stopping him dead in his tracks. "Miguel, right?" He turned slowly, the mop bucket still in one hand, the other wrapped loosely around a damp rag. It was the first time she had ever said his name, not just to him, but at all, in any context he could recall. Her voice held a different quality than he'd heard in the boardroom, stripped of its dismissiveness, imbued instead with an urgent curiosity, almost tentative. "Yes, ma'am." His face remained neutral, a canvas of polite professionalism, revealing nothing of the sudden spike in his pulse. "I was hoping I could speak to you for a moment." Her tone was less a request and more a direct, softened command. He nodded, a slight inclination of his head. "Of course. Do you mind if I put this away first?" He gestured to the mop and bucket, buying himself a few precious seconds to compose his thoughts. "Not at all." Her patience was uncharacteristic, a further indication of the gravity of her intent, the depth of her need to understand. Inside the supply room, a small, utilitarian space redolent with the sharp, clean scent of pine cleaner and the warm, slightly metallic plastic smell of mop buckets, Miguel meticulously set the mop back on its hook, wiped his hands carefully on a fresh towel, and followed her out. They walked in silence through a quiet, almost deserted hallway, the air thick with unspoken questions and the burgeoning weight of their impending conversation, until they reached a small, secluded break area tucked away behind the executive wing. It was deserted, a secluded spot far from prying eyes and eager ears, a perfect stage for a clandestine revelation. Veronica turned to him, her expression a careful blend of her usual executive composure and something new, a flicker of profound, almost disbelieving curiosity, an intense desire for answers. "Did you submit the translation?" Her question was direct, unembellished, a spear thrown straight to the heart of the matter. Miguel didn't answer right away. He took a slow breath, centering himself. He looked at her, not with defiance, not with shame, but with a calm that felt like standing in the absolute eye of a storm, utterly centered amidst swirling chaos. His gaze was steady, unwavering, meeting hers directly. "I did." The two words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history. She folded her arms, a familiar gesture of authority, but her posture was subtly less rigid, her grip on her own elbows a little looser. "Why anonymously?" "Because I didn't want credit," he replied, his voice even, devoid of any self-pity or pride, just quiet, unvarnished fact. "I wanted protection. For you, for the company, for the people who depend on it, including me." He met her gaze, a silent, profound challenge in his quiet candor, forcing her to confront the implications of his choice. Veronica studied him, her sharp mind working furiously, trying to reconcile the image of the janitor before her with the undeniable brilliance of the anonymous savior who had saved her company from financial ruin and public humiliation. "You could have asked for anything, Miguel. A raise, a promotion, a job, recognition, a place in the sun, a new life." He tilted his head slightly, a gesture that conveyed both understanding of her perspective and a deep, internal weariness that transcended his years. "That's not why I did it." "Then why?" Her question was softer now, tinged with genuine bewilderment, a rare crack in her formidable facade. Miguel's eyes didn't waver, holding her gaze with unwavering intensity. "Because silence, in this instance, would have been betrayal, and I've betrayed enough of myself already." That stopped her cold. The words, delivered with a quiet intensity that was almost painful in its honesty, resonated with a profound, personal truth that was utterly disarming, revealing a depth she had never anticipated. Her posture softened, just a little, a shift in her carefully maintained defenses. "You're not just a janitor, are you?" It wasn't a question, but a dawning, undeniable realization, an acknowledgement of the profound incongruity before her. "I am now," he said, a ghost of a sad smile touching his lips. "But not always." "Where did you learn German like that?" she pressed, her professional curiosity now fully piqued, overriding all other concerns. "That wasn't textbook translation. That was something more. It was visceral." "That was life," he interrupted gently, his gaze distant for a moment, lost in the complex, painful landscape of his past. "And loss, and a little bit of academia once." He didn't elaborate, didn't offer any further details, and she, sensing the boundary, didn't push. The weight of his unshared past hung in the air, a silent, powerful presence that deepened the respect growing in Veronica. Veronica stepped back, crossing her arms again, but the defensiveness had been replaced by a growing, almost reverent respect. Her expression had shifted from skepticism to dawning comprehension. "Do you know what you saved us from?" Her voice was laced with an almost desperate gratitude. Miguel nodded. "Yes, and it's not over. Not truly." Her brows furrowed, a flicker of genuine concern. "What do you mean not over?" "The clause was a trap," he continued, his voice shifting, taking on the analytical cadence of a seasoned scholar, his eyes sharp with insight. "Not just technically complex. It was meticulously designed to look legitimate, to seamlessly pass through legal and compliance reviews without raising any significant red flags. It wasn't just carelessness on your team's part, Miss Ling. It was strategic, calculated, deliberate." Veronica's expression turned ice cold, a sudden, chilling realization dawning on her, stripping away her composure. "Are you saying someone inside actively planted this?" Her voice was barely a whisper, laced with barely contained fury. "I'm saying someone either didn't read it carefully enough or didn't care to," Miguel interjected, cutting off her unspoken accusation, redirecting it slightly, but the implication of internal malfeasance lingered. A beat of profound silence, then another. Veronica took a deep, shaky breath, attempting to compose herself, but she was clearly shaken to her core by the implications of deliberate sabotage. "I should have seen it," she murmured, a rare, raw confession of vulnerability, a stark admission of failure. Miguel offered a half-smile, a hint of empathy in his eyes. "You saw what they let you see? People like me. We see what gets left behind, what gets overlooked, the details hidden in plain sight in the shadows." He spoke not with bitterness, but with a quiet, profound understanding of the unseen world. She looked at him then, truly looked at him, not through him, not past him, but at him, seeing a man, not a uniform. A flicker of something akin to awe, or perhaps profound respect, crossed her face. "Do you know how rare it is to meet someone who tells the truth with no need to be heard, no desire for acclaim?" she asked, her voice quiet, reflective, utterly sincere. Miguel glanced away, a familiar defensiveness rising, but softened by her genuine tone. "That's what happens when you've spent a decade cleaning up after people who never asked your name." Veronica didn't speak, but something fundamental in her shifted irrevocably. The invisible man had, for a potent, undeniable moment, become powerfully, brilliantly visible. Later that day, in Bayanova's legal department, the 3 compliance officers who had initially reviewed the Munich agreement were poring over the flagged clauses again, their faces pale with a mix of dread and grudging admiration for the unknown translator. The language, buried deep in technical terms and legal subterfuge, had required a mastery of both complex German contract law and cutting-edge biotech regulation to spot. They were utterly stunned. "He must have had advanced training," one whispered, pushing his glasses up his nose, his voice thick with a mixture of professional awe and personal humiliation. "Or he's uniquely gifted, or both, a rare combination." The anonymous translator was now a ghost whose undeniable brilliance haunted their collective perceived incompetence, a spectral warning of what they had missed. Meanwhile, in the utilitarian comfort of the janitor's lounge, a small, unassuming room with worn furniture and a faint smell of disinfectant, Miguel changed into his street clothes. He pulled out his phone, saw a message from Camilla. "How was your day? Mine was better. Art class was fun again. Love you." He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes, and typed back, "Good. Quiet." He added, with a subtle personal touch, "Like the kind that matters." Then he sat down on the worn bench, pulled out his leather journal, the personal one, and added one more sentence to the day's entry. "Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is whisper truth into a room full of noise." The words, a quiet declaration of his continued purpose, resonated in the silence of the empty lounge, a testament to the power of unseen actions. "Miguel, wait!" The words, sharp and clear, resonated across the vast, marble-floored lobby, cutting through the usual evening quiet with an undeniable authority. It was a command, yet delivered with a curious inflection, as if meant for a soldier rather than a janitor. Miguel, his back to the sound, in the midst of pushing his cleaning cart towards the south exit, turned slowly, his mop bucket still firmly in one hand, the other wrapped loosely around a damp rag. His shift was unequivocally over, his mind already drifting towards Camilla, to the quiet comfort of their small apartment and the simple joy of her company. Veronica Ling stood near the gleaming bank of executive elevators, her heels, usually a staccato rhythm of unwavering power against the marble, now strangely silent. Her posture a fascinating blend of her characteristic precision and something he hadn't seen before. A subtle, almost vulnerable openness. She walked toward him, not with her usual clipped, purposeful stride that devoured space, but with measured steps, intentional and deliberate, as if carefully navigating unfamiliar, sensitive terrain. "I need to speak with you now," she stated, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument, yet noticeably devoid of her usual executive imperiousness. The directness was a demand, but the tone was an invitation. Miguel glanced subtly at the security guard by the reception desk, who studiously avoided their gaze, then back to her. He understood the unspoken demand for privacy, the need for discretion that permeated the executive world. "Of course, Miss Ling." He maintained his polite, professional demeanor, his face a neutral canvas. "Veronica," she corrected. The name offered almost as an olive branch, a subtle, deliberate shift in their dynamic, signaling a new level of interaction. That was new, indeed, and highly significant. She led him into a small, seldom-used side conference room, a sterile, impersonal space that nonetheless smelled faintly of whiteboard ink and lemon-scented cleaner. His scent, he realized with a trace of quiet irony, the subtle, clean perfume of his nightly work, lingered here. She closed the door behind them, the soft click sealing them in, arms crossed. Her expression a complex mix of guarded concern and unwavering resolve, her keen eyes fixed on him. "I don't want the press to find out about what nearly happened with the German deal," she began, her voice dropping to a low, almost confidential tone, laced with the urgency of crisis management. "The potential for a PR nightmare is astronomical, a complete disaster for our reputation and our stock. But I also don't want it buried. What you did, what you saw, means we have a much bigger problem internally than just a bad contract." Her gaze was direct, piercing, demanding an answer that went beyond mere translation. "The implications for internal sabotage are staggering." Miguel nodded slowly, acknowledging the unspoken gravity of her words, the intricate web of corporate intrigue. "I agree." The language suggested a deliberate intent to mislead. Veronica tilted her head slightly, studying him intently, an executive accustomed to assessing people quickly, dissecting their motives and capabilities. "So tell me, Miguel, how does a janitor, a man who is quiet, off the grid, with no LinkedIn presence, no public academic record, and no ostensible connection to our high-level legal work manage to outthink an entire department of highly paid contract attorneys and technical translators? People who are paid millions for their specialized expertise?" Her question was not accusatory, but genuinely puzzled, a challenge to his carefully constructed anonymity, a raw expression of intellectual curiosity. Miguel didn't blink. His response was calm, unhurried, delivered with a quiet, irrefutable authority of truth. "Because I wasn't always a janitor, Miss Ling." He deliberately used her formal title, maintaining a professional distance despite her attempt to bridge it. She folded her arms tighter, a flicker of something akin to validation in her sharp eyes, a dawning understanding. "I figured that much. My gut told me." "But what were you?" "Miguel Alvarez. I taught linguistics and contract interpretation at the University of Texas," he stated, his voice devoid of pride or regret, just simple, factual recounting. "I specialized in multilingual risk language, particularly in biotech. My wife, Sophia, got sick. I stepped away, and I never went back." The last words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief, profound sacrifice, and the raw echoes of a life irrevocably altered. Veronica leaned against the table, her own posture subtly softening, her usual corporate armor momentarily shedding in the face of his personal tragedy. "What stopped you? Was it purely grief?" "Grief," he said plainly, unflinchingly, his gaze distant, lost for a moment in the landscape of his past. "And the crushing cost of starting over when your entire world burns down around you. When everything you built is gone, you seek a different kind of peace." The room went quiet, filled with the unspoken weight of his profound loss, a palpable silence that resonated deeply. Then, softly, tentatively, her voice imbued with a newfound empathy, she asked, "And now, Miguel? What do you do now?" Miguel met her eyes, a flicker of something akin to quiet defiance, or perhaps just resolute clarity. "Now I mop your boardrooms, Miss Ling. And apparently," he added, a dry, almost imperceptible humor in his tone, "I save your company from ruin." A silence stretched between them, a moment of profound acknowledgement. a quiet understanding passing between two very different individuals. She walked closer, her gaze unwavering, studying him intently, her executive brain already whirring, recognizing immense, untapped value, a diamond hidden in plain sight. You could have asked for anything, Miguel. A significant raise, a prestigious job title, a substantial sum of money, a chance at a completely new life. Why just drop the translation and disappear? Why remain hidden in the shadows when you possessed such a gift? Her voice was almost pleading, struggling to comprehend his selflessness. He gave her a sad, knowing smile, a ghost of the brilliant man he once was, a man unburdened by corporate ambitions. I wasn't looking to be found, Veronica. I had made my peace with invisibility. Veronica crossed her arms again, but her expression was now one of firm conviction, her jaw set. Well, I think it's time you were found, recognized, utilized. The following morning, Miguel was summoned officially, this time to the rarefied atmosphere of the 43rd floor. He'd never been up there before. It was the undisputed executive level, reserved exclusively for the highest echelons of Bionova's power structure. The air smelled different here, not of industrial pine cleaner, but of crisp eucalyptus and understated wealth, of quiet ambition and polished marble. Original abstract art, worth more than his annual salary, graced the walls, silent testaments to corporate taste and boundless budgets. He was directed to a smaller, more intimate conference room where he sat across from three imposing figures. Veronica, her presence more formidable than ever. Derek Lang from legal, his face pale and etched with residual shock. And Gordon Hale, the CFO, his usual bluster replaced by a sober intensity. No one offered him coffee, a subtle reminder of his current status, but crucially, no one dismissed him either. He was there by invitation, by necessity, a critical piece of an unfolding puzzle. We now believe, with a high degree of certainty, that someone inside deliberately leaked an early draft of the contract to our German partners, Derek began, his voice tight with controlled anger, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Someone who wanted those insidious clauses in there. Someone who sought to compromise Bionova from within, possibly for personal gain. Miguel nodded, his expression unreadable, a detached observer confirming a hypothesis. I suspected as much from the linguistic construction. It showed malicious intent. Gordon Hale interjected, his voice gruff, his concern for the company's financials now outweighing any residual skepticism about Miguel's presence. Do you have proof, Dr. Alvarez? Any hard evidence we can use to nail this saboteur? He almost choked on the Dr. Alvarez, a title that felt alien in his own mouth. No, Miguel replied, calm and unwavering, his gaze steady as he met Gordon's surprised stare. But I can show you which parts were written to look benign, designed to evade detection. They weren't machine translated. They were curated, handcrafted even, by someone who understood the nuanced interplay of both languages and legal systems, someone actively trying to deceive our internal teams. He pointed to a printout of the document, now spread across the table, his finger tracing a particularly convoluted passage. This term here, Dodd and Gaviner, it doesn't exist in normal, legitimate contracts. It's legal camouflage, a red herring, a linguistic anomaly designed to divert attention and appear innocuous. It's fabricated, a complete invention used to mask a critical concession. Veronica leaned forward, her eyes locked on Miguel, a flicker of profound understanding and dawning horror passing between them. And how did you catch it, Miguel? What made you see what our entire legal and compliance teams, with all their resources, somehow missed? Miguel looked at her steady, his gaze unwavering, delivering a truth that was both simple and profoundly uncomfortable for those in power. Because people who are forgotten tend to read more carefully. We have to. Our survival depends on seeing what others overlook. That line landed hard, reverberating through the room, a stinging indictment of their corporate culture of privilege and oversight. Derek sat back in his chair, a low whistle escaping his lips, a genuine sound of amazed respect. I think we've profoundly underestimated our janitor. Veronica didn't smile, didn't react with levity. She simply said, her voice laced with grim realization, "No, Derek, we've misjudged our company, our entire culture." The implication was clear. The fault lay not with Miguel, but with their own systemic biases. That afternoon, as Miguel was preparing to leave, having finished his assigned cleaning tasks with his usual meticulousness, he found Veronica waiting near the south exit. No entourage, no clipboard, no corporate armor. Just her, standing alone in the same brisk wind that tousled his collar. A rare moment of personal, unshielded approach. I owe you something, Miguel, she said, her voice low and direct, almost vulnerable. Miguel shook his head, a gesture of quiet refusal. You owe me nothing, Miss Ling. My satisfaction is in the truth being seen, in the company being protected. No, she insisted, her voice firmer now, unwavering, her eyes holding his. You owe yourself something. A chance to stop being invisible. A chance to reclaim what you lost, what you so clearly deserve. He tilted his head, thoughtful, considering her words, which resonated with a deep, suppressed longing within him. Visibility is a luxury when you have something to lose, Veronica. I learned that the hard way. He spoke her name, a subtle acknowledgement of the significant shift in their relationship, a quiet intimacy forged in crisis. Veronica stepped closer, her gaze intense, her vision clear. So, what do you want, Miguel? Really, not what you think you should ask for, but what your heart truly desires. What would bring you peace? The question was so direct, so unguarded, it required a moment of profound introspection. He didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the city outside, to the tiny, distant lights of homes like his. Then he said quietly, his voice imbued with a profound sincerity that reached her core. I want my daughter to grow up knowing that telling the truth doesn't require a stage, just the quiet courage to whisper it when no one else will. And that her father, no matter his uniform or title, lives by that truth. Her expression changed, softened visibly, almost maternal, a rare glimpse of deep empathy on her usually formidable face. You want to protect your daughter, she said, understanding dawning, seeing the heart of his sacrifice. I always have, he replied, his voice firm, resolute, even if it meant sacrificing parts of myself. Then let me help, she offered, her voice gaining momentum, a new vision taking shape, powerful and compelling. We're building a new division. International compliance, cross-border language audits. A team dedicated to rooting out these hidden threats. It needs someone with your unique skill set, Miguel. Someone who sees the hidden dangers, someone with your integrity, your meticulous eye, your profound understanding of both language and the human heart. I told you, Miguel replied, a faint, weary smile touching his lips, a reminder of his past decisions. I'm not looking to be found. My life is small and safe. No, Veronica said, her eyes holding his, a quiet, unwavering challenge within their depths. But maybe it's time to stop hiding. Not just for her, but for you. To reclaim the man you were meant to be. That night, Miguel sat at the kitchen table, the familiar scent of leftover rice and fried plantains warming the small apartment. Camilla was engrossed in her homework beside him, her pencil scratching softly. Hey, Dad, she asked without looking up, her voice light. Yeah, Mia. If someone gave you a new nameplate for your job, but it had your old title, the one you used to be proud of, would you use it? The question, so specific, so poignant in its innocent delivery, struck him with surprising force, resonating with his deepest, most buried desires. Miguel looked at her, truly looked at her, searching her face for the source of this profound query. Where'd that come from, Major? She shrugged, engrossed in her math problems. Nowhere, just wondering. It popped into my head. He paused, considering the weight of her words, the subtle challenge hidden within them. Then he said, slowly, thoughtfully, only if I believed I still deserved it. Camilla, only if I felt it was truly mine again. Camilla looked at him, her bright, insightful eyes holding his with an unwavering certainty. Then I think you do. Dad, I really do. And just like that, something shifted profoundly in Miguel's chest. Not pride, not ego, but a profound sense of recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of his worth, and maybe, just maybe, a nascent readiness. A readiness to step out of the shadows, not for himself, not for acclaim, but for the girl who saw him, truly saw him, beyond his janitor's uniform, for the man he still was. Deep down, the seeds of rebirth had been sown. Miguel had never been in the head office conference room with the lights on. His presence in such hallowed spaces was typically reserved for the deep hours of the night, when the city outside slept its uneasy sleep. During those nocturnal shifts, he was the solitary guardian, moving with practiced efficiency, wiping down the glossy surface of the massive 12-foot mahogany table, meticulously collecting the quiet, scattered remains of corporate strategy, a few cold coffee cups, a handful of forgotten pens, a crumpled post-it note here and there bearing hastily scribbled directives. But this morning, the atmosphere was starkly different. The lights were bright, almost glaringly so, illuminating every polished surface and every anxious face. The air itself felt thick with a tangible, almost suffocating tension, and every seat at the imposing table was taken, filled with the sharp, expectant, and undeniably worried faces of Bionova's elite executives. Veronica sat at the head of the table, her posture radiating controlled power, her gaze fixed intently on the massive, high-definition screen behind her. Projected onto it was the treacherous German document Miguel had translated, its insidious clauses now starkly highlighted in an ominous red, undeniably visible for all to see. Next to her, Derek Lang, head of legal affairs, his face now a mask of grim determination, devoid of his usual corporate bravado, clicked through the annotated sections line by line. He meticulously exposed the trap hidden within the contract, dissecting it with the precision of a surgeon, revealing the rot beneath the pristine marble. And across the room, at the far end of the table, strategically positioned so all eyes could fall upon him, sat Eric Shaw, Executive Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. He was, as always, impeccably dressed in a clean, expensive suit that bespoke effortless wealth, radiating a confident smile that, to Miguel's acutely perceptive eye, was just a shade too confident, a touch too unruffled for the gravity of the situation. It was a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're not accusing anyone yet," Derek began, his voice carefully neutral, though his eyes occasionally darted, almost imperceptibly, to Eric Shaw. But the early draft of the Munich Agreement submitted to our German partners included terms that were never cleared by legal, terms that were never reviewed by the board, terms that fundamentally compromised Bionova's core intellectual property and client data security. His voice grew tighter with each word, thinly veiled anger simmering beneath the professional facade. Eric Shaw's smile didn't falter, a practiced veneer of innocence that seemed impervious to the rising tension. "Mistakes happen, Derek. We were moving fast, trying to expedite the partnership. It was merely a celebratory draft, not a final, legally binding one. Just an informal exchange to build goodwill and momentum." His tone was smooth, dismissive, attempting to downplay the severity of the situation. Veronica didn't blink, her gaze unwavering as she slowly turned her formidable attention to Eric. Her voice, though low, carried the undeniable weight of a grave accusation. "You sent a draft, Eric, that explicitly gave our German partner full, unrestricted back-end access to all client genomic data from North America and shared intellectual property rights for all future co-developed genetic mapping software. That's not a typo, Eric. That's not a mistake of expedition. That's intent. That's sabotage." The word hung in the air, heavy and damning, silencing any potential retort. Eric leaned back in his chair, his confident smile momentarily flickering, a micro-expression of panic crossing his features, but he quickly recovered, his composure a testament to years of corporate maneuvering. "And where's the irrefutable proof, Veronica? This entire investigation, this witch hunt, is based on the word of an anonymous translator, isn't it? A ghost in the machine, so to speak. Someone whose credentials, whose very existence, cannot be verified." His tone was dismissive, subtly demeaning, calculated to invalidate the source without directly attacking it, to cast doubt on the very foundation of the evidence. Miguel, seated unobtrusively at the far end of the table, a deliberate choice by Veronica to allow him to observe the unfiltered reactions of everyone present, quietly raised his hand. Veronica, without even needing to turn, nodded almost imperceptibly, a silent acknowledgement of his prearranged cue. "Go ahead, Miguel." "I wasn't anonymous because I was hiding," Miguel said calmly, his voice clear and resonant, carrying effortlessly across the hushed room, drawing every eye to him. His gaze was steady, unwavering, holding the attention of the stunned executives. "I was anonymous because I didn't trust that the truth would be enough on its own, that it wouldn't be buried by powerful interests, by those who had something to lose." He met Eric Shaw's gaze directly, his eyes holding a quiet, unwavering challenge that spoke volumes. "But I trust it now. I trust the truth." Eric Shaw turned fully towards him, a sneer twisting his lips, curiosity warring fiercely with disdain. "And you are?" The implied question was deeply insulting, designed to diminish Miguel, to cast him as irrelevant. Miguel stood slowly, deliberately, his posture straightening, commanding a sudden, unexpected respect that silenced the entire room. He was no longer just the janitor. He was Dr. Alvarez. "I am the man who used to teach this language, Mr. Shaw," he stated, his voice resonating with an authority that had long been dormant, "before your legal team forgot how to read it, before you chose to exploit its nuances." A collective gasp, barely suppressed, rippled through the executives, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning recognition. Miguel walked with purpose to the screen, Taking the laser pointer from Derek Lang's stunned, trembling hand, he tapped the highlighted German term. This term here, dot and Aruken rect, it is not standard. It is not even common in legitimate German legal documents or biotech patents. It's fabricated, a linguistic invention. Legally, it's a smoke screen designed to appear legitimate, but to mask its true, devastating intent, to slip past casual review. He turned to Eric Shaw, his gaze unwavering, the laser dot now fixed unerringly on Shaw's chest, a silent accusation. And based on your email metadata, Mr. Shaw, and the version control logs we've accessed from our servers, it came from your machine. Inserted directly into the draft before it was sent to Munich. Eric's confident, arrogant smile cracked, just slightly, like thin ice over a deep, dark chasm. His face paled visibly, the veneer of composure finally dissolving, replaced by a raw, naked fear. Veronica folded her hands on the table, her voice calm, chillingly precise, devoid of any personal emotion. We've already sent everything, the original draft, the translation, Miguel's analysis, and the forensic metadata to our internal compliance division and external forensic auditors. If they confirm, unequivocally, that this was a deliberate act of sabotage, the board will vote on your immediate removal, Eric, effective today, and we will pursue all legal avenues. Eric opened his mouth, then shut it. A strangled, inarticulate sound caught in his throat. The battle was definitively over. Later that afternoon, after the dust had settled and Eric Shaw had been quietly, unceremoniously escorted out of the building, his career and reputation shattered, Veronica found Miguel in the executive break room. He was standing alone, staring out the panoramic window, a solitary figure with a cup of black coffee in his hand. The city stretched out beneath them, a silent, sprawling testament to the power of unseen forces and quiet truths. "No sugar?" she asked softly, stepping beside him, a rare, personal overture. He smiled without turning, a genuine, unforced smile that reached his quiet eyes, reflecting the satisfaction of justice served. "I saved the sweetness for better days, Veronica. Days like this, when truth prevails." She leaned against the counter, her own relief evident, her posture less rigid than it had been in years. That was impressive, Miguel, truly, a masterclass in strategic unmasking. "I wasn't trying to be impressive," Miguel replied, his gaze still fixed on the distant skyline, the sprawling urban tapestry. "I was trying to be heard, to make the truth undeniable, to give it a voice." Veronica looked at him, truly seeing him now, not just as a janitor, not just as a brilliant scholar, but as a man of profound, unwavering integrity and quiet strength. "You were, and people are finally listening, Miguel, really listening." A comfortable pause settled between them, a shared understanding that transcended their different worlds. Then she asked gently, her voice tinged with a deeper, more personal curiosity, "Why didn't you stay in the academic world, Miguel? You clearly had everything: a brilliant mind, a respected position, a promising career that was on an upward trajectory." Miguel stirred his coffee, the simple act a grounding ritual, a moment of reflection. "I had a wife who was sick, Veronica, a brilliant woman herself, and a baby who needed a father more than she needed a distinguished professor. I walked away because the world I built on words, on theories and intellect, on academic prestige, couldn't save the people I loved most. It felt hollow, irrelevant in the face of true human suffering." Veronica's voice softened even further, filled with genuine compassion, a rare glimpse of her humanity. "I'm so sorry, Miguel. I truly am. That's a profound sacrifice." He finally looked at her, his eyes clear and accepting, devoid of bitterness or regret. "You don't need to be, Veronica. I chose what mattered. I still do. My values didn't change, only my path." She studied him for a moment, a deep respect evident in her gaze, a new appreciation for the man before her. "You know, Miguel, we promote people for far less than what you just did. This could be a new, incredibly powerful path for you within Bionova." "I'm not looking for promotion, Veronica," he said, setting the cup down gently, the soft clink echoing in the quiet room. "Just peace, a quiet purpose that aligns with my values." "But don't you want to do more? To achieve more? To fulfill your potential?" she pressed, an executive's ingrained ambition unable to fully comprehend such an answer. Miguel met her gaze, a profound, ancient wisdom in his eyes, a calm certainty. "More isn't always louder, Veronica. Sometimes the biggest difference is made by the one no one expects. The one who works in the shadows, unburdened by ego, driven only by truth, by integrity. His words were a quiet, powerful manifesto. That night, Miguel walked Camilla home from her after-school art class, the cool evening air a refreshing balm. She had a charcoal sketch tucked carefully under her arm, a masterpiece in her eyes, and her ponytail swayed rhythmically with each joyful, skipping step. Miss Tam said, "You're famous now, Dad," she teased, her eyes sparkling with delight, having overheard whispers from school staff. "Apparently, there's a rumor you saved your company from $1 billion mistake." Miguel smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "That's an exaggeration, Mija, but not a lie." He paused, looking at her, allowing the truth to settle. "No, not a lie at all." Camilla grinned, skipping a little faster, her imagination running wild. "Did you get a cape or a shiny badge, Dad? Like a superhero?" He laughed, a rich, full sound that rarely escaped him these days. "No cape, mija, just more paperwork, I think, and perhaps a few more questions." They crossed a quiet intersection, the streetlights humming to life, casting long, dancing shadows. Camilla looked up at him, her expression turning suddenly serious, mirroring a maturity beyond her years. "You know, Dad, I told the mean kids in my class that my dad used to speak 5 languages, and they laughed at me again today." Her voice was small, a hint of lingering hurt. Miguel looked down, his heart clenching, a familiar protective surge rising within him. "I'm so sorry, mija. I really am. No one should ever laugh at you for that." She shook her head, her grip on his hand tightening, a silent reassurance. "Don't be, Dad. I told them that one language is enough if you speak with heart, and they stopped laughing then." Her innocent, yet profound wisdom cut through his pain. He stopped walking, utterly stunned by her words. That line, "one language is enough if you speak with heart," it hit harder than anything in a complex legal contract, more deeply than any academic text. "You said that, Camilla?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion, barely a whisper. She nodded, her eyes bright with innocent certainty, reflecting the streetlights. He took her hand, squeezing it gently, a profound sense of pride swelling within him. "Then I guess, Mija, the best thing I ever translated wasn't any contract or any book, but all the quiet lessons, all those unspoken truths, were translated into you. Camilla, you are my greatest work." The streetlights cast long, dancing shadows around them, but in that moment, their bond was brighter and more profound than any light. Later that night, Miguel sat by the window as the city lights blinked like distant, scattered stars against the vast, dark canvas of the sky. He opened his leather journal again, the personal one that now held his journey. He picked up his pen and wrote, his hand steady, "The real cost of being invisible is forgetting your own name. But the gift is remembering that value doesn't need volume." He closed the book, turned off the lamp, and whispered to himself, a soft, resolute promise that echoed in the quiet room. "You're not gone, Miguel. You're just becoming." The quiet ascent had begun, a journey not merely back to his old self, but towards a new, more integrated, more authentic version of Miguel Alvarez, an father, scholar, and quiet guardian of truth. The seeds of a new chapter had taken root, watered by the courage of his daughter and the dawning recognition of his own worth. The elevator chimed on Bionova's 43rd floor with the cold, authoritative finality of a courtroom bell, an abrupt signal of an important arrival. Miguel stepped out slowly, the subtle hum of the elevator fading behind him. He felt a peculiar, almost electric mix of anticipation and trepidation. He felt less like a janitor summoned for a dressing down, and more like a man summoned not to be questioned, but to answer for something sacred, something profoundly important that transcended his daily existence, something he had, in fact, saved. He wore the same dark blue uniform he always did, no blazer, no pressed shirt, no silk tie, just Miguel Alvarez, janitor, father, former linguist, now standing at the edge of a new kind of battlefield, a silent architect stepping into the very structure he had helped save from collapse. The room before him was not merely a conference room. It was the nerve center of Bionova, filled with the top brass, legal heads, compliance officers, cybersecurity leads, and, most prominently, Veronica Ling, seated at the helm, her presence radiating a calm, formidable authority. She was flanked by 2 formidable board members, their sharp suits and even sharper expressions indicating they had flown in overnight, their faces grim and expectant. On the massive, wall-mounted screen behind her glowed the latest forensic analysis. Detailed document metadata, precise timestamps, incriminating IP logs, a chilling digital map of shattered trust and exposed betrayal, all pointing to Eric Shaw, Veronica, without a word, gestured for Miguel to take a seat at the table. It wasn't at the subservient end, but purposefully placed a few chairs down from her, integrating him directly into the core decision-making circle, a silent but powerful statement of his newfound significance. He sat down, outwardly calm and unshaken, though his palms were a quiet storm, clammy and tense beneath the cool, polished surface of the table, a testament to the internal weight he carried. Derek Lang, his face pale from sleepless nights, but now resolute, opened the proceedings. We've confirmed, unequivocally, that the Munich Agreement document was indeed edited outside established company protocol. The inserted clauses, specifically the fabricated dot and Gaviner term, originated from a remote device. Forensic analysis, cross-referenced with internal network logs, clearly shows it was masked through Eric Shaw's internal credentials. The digital trail ends at precisely 1:47 am on March 11th, at Eric Shaw's home IP address, logged during non-work hours, directly before the draft was sent to Germany. One of the board members, a stern-faced woman with sharp, unblinking eyes and an air of no-nonsense authority, leaned forward. We've already initiated separation proceedings, effective immediately. Mr. Shaw's employment is terminated, and we are assessing further legal action. But that still leaves a critical, foundational question for this board. Her gaze, along with every other pair of eyes in the room, turned to Miguel, a silent, expectant query hanging heavy in the air. Mr. Alvarez, she continued, her voice measured, how did you spot it? What led you to that specific clause, hidden so cunningly, when our most seasoned legal minds missed it? Miguel didn't answer right away. He took a slow, deliberate moment, allowing the profound silence to hang, allowing the full weight of his unique insight to settle in the room. He met the board member's intense gaze directly. Then, softly, his voice clear and resonating with years of quiet, meticulous observation, he spoke. Because when you've spent years scrubbing silence from other people's flaws, miss, he began, his voice gaining a quiet, undeniable authority, you learn to hear what isn't being said. You learn to see the deliberate omissions, the unnatural quiet in the language, the parts that don't fit the natural rhythm of truth. A beat of profound silence followed his words, even deeper than before. Someone scribbled furious notes, another nodded slowly, a dawning comprehension, almost an epiphany, on their face. His explanation, simple yet profoundly insightful, resonated with an unexpected, almost spiritual truth, cutting through the corporate jargon and intellectual pretension. Veronica spoke next, her voice sharper, more decisive than before, reflecting a profound, almost revolutionary shift in her perspective and leadership. We need to rebuild trust internally, among our dedicated employees, and externally, with our invaluable partners and clients. This breach of integrity, this act of calculated sabotage, demands a complete, systemic overhaul of our vigilance and our internal processes. I want Miguel to oversee the forensic review of all recent international contracts. Not just the German ones. Every single one. Quietly, meticulously. I want his eyes on every word, every clause. He understands the subtle nuances, the linguistic traps, the unspoken intent that our current systems, and frankly, our deeply ingrained corporate assumptions and biases, have consistently missed. A murmur, a quiet ripple of surprise and skepticism, rippled through the room. One executive, a man from the European division, frowned visibly, a subtle expression of professional unease and perhaps even a hint of disdain crossing his face. He's not credentialed, Veronica, he interjected, his voice carrying a dismissive edge. Not for this level of responsibility, not in a global compliance role. Miguel, before anyone else could, calmly interjected, his voice steady, his gaze meeting the executive's directly, unwavering. I'm not asking for your trust, sir. His words cut through the skepticism like a finely honed blade. Only your attention and your willingness to learn. Veronica leaned forward, her eyes bright with unwavering conviction, a fierce protectiveness for Miguel. You'll get both. His record from the University of Texas in linguistics and contract interpretation, though dated, is impeccable and highly specialized, and his recent demonstration of insight here in saving this company is unparalleled. It is the only credential that matters now. Her words, delivered with a quiet, undeniable power, silenced the murmurs, leaving no room for further dissent. The weight of her authority, combined with Miguel's quiet brilliance, was undeniable. The next few days passed in a controlled chaos, a whirlwind of internal restructuring, urgent reassessment, and a palpable shift in corporate culture. Behind the scenes, Miguel worked with a quiet intensity that astonished and, at times, shamed the internal legal teams. He sat at desks usually reserved for external consultants charging exorbitant fees, marking up complex contracts with precise red ink and finely detailed, hand-scrawled annotations that revealed hidden meanings and dangerous ambiguities. He never asked for lunch breaks, never raised his voice, never sought to dominate conversations. He simply saw. And when he circled a paragraph, when his pen highlighted a phrase, when he pointed to a seemingly innocuous term, legal teams paid immediate, rapt attention. His presence, initially met with deep skepticism and thinly veiled condescension, quickly transformed into a grudging, then outright respect, even a quiet reverence. One afternoon, as a team of senior legal staff debated a particularly thorny clause in a new biotech collaboration agreement with a prominent firm in Brazil, their discussion growing increasingly convoluted and bogged down in technicalities, Miguel quietly walked over to the large monitor displaying the contract. He pointed with a precise finger. "This phrasing here, do sense it's a critical misrepresentation in Brazilian law. In their legal framework, it implies a very specific, highly sensitive category of personal data that, if mishandled, triggers severe constitutional penalties and crippling regulatory fines. You're using it in a way that directly invites massive liability under their data protection laws, which are among the strictest globally, far beyond what our current legal review appears to grasp." A sudden, stunned silence settled over the team, their confident arguments dissolving into confusion. Then one junior attorney, her face paling, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and dawning, horrified understanding, whispered, "He's right. Oh my God, he's absolutely right. I missed that entirely. It's a fundamental difference in legal interpretation with catastrophic implications." Miguel nodded almost imperceptibly and walked away without further comment, leaving the stunned team to absorb his precise, undeniable insight. "He doesn't talk much," someone muttered, still reeling from the sudden revelation. "He doesn't have to," another replied, picking up a red pen. "His pen talks for him, and it speaks volumes, loudly enough for all of us to hear now." One evening, long after the sun had dipped below the skyline, painting the city in shades of purple and orange, and most employees had departed, Miguel found Veronica standing alone in the glass-walled break room, nursing a half cup of coffee. The city lights twinkled like a scattered galaxy below. She didn't turn when he entered, seemingly lost in deep contemplation. "I used to think being the smartest person in the room meant always having the answer," she said, her voice quiet, almost reflective, as if speaking more to herself than to him. A profound confession. "Now I think it means knowing where to look. Knowing when you don't have the answer, and knowing who does." Miguel leaned against the counter beside her, the subtle sense of coffee and lingering lemon cleaner mingling in the air. "Smart fades, Veronica. Awareness lasts longer. It's a different kind of intelligence, one honed by observation, not just education." She looked at him then, a genuine, unforced smile touching her lips, a rare expression of warmth and vulnerability. "You've changed the culture of this company in 2 weeks, Miguel. Completely. There's a new vigilance, a new respect for detail, for the unseen." "I didn't mean to," he replied, genuinely surprised by the profound scope of her observation, his humility unwavering. "That's exactly why it matters," she countered, her smile widening, acknowledging his inherent integrity. She sipped her coffee, a moment of comfortable, appreciative silence passing between them, a quiet understanding forged in shared crisis. Then Veronica said, her voice soft but direct, her gaze penetrating, "You know what shocked me most, Miguel? Not that you spotted the clause. Not even that you translated it so cleanly, so perfectly. Those are brilliant skills, but skills can be taught or bought. What then? That you could have saved yourself a decade ago, reclaimed your illustrious career, your entire former life, and you didn't? You chose not to." Her question, gentle as it was, cut to the very core of his profound, decade-long sacrifice. Miguel didn't flinch. His gaze was steady, unwavering, holding hers. "I did save myself," he said quietly, his voice imbued with a deep, personal conviction that resonated with absolute truth. "Just not in a way that fit someone else's headline or corporate ambition. I chose a different kind of salvation, a quieter one, for Camilla, a life where I could simply be there." His words were a powerful testament to his unwavering commitment as a father, a choice that defined him more profoundly than any academic title ever could. That night, as Miguel arrived home, the familiar sense of their small apartment welcomed him. He found Camilla on the living room floor, paint smeared across her elbows, her canvas filled with golden hues and long, dramatic shadows. Her creativity, once stifled by his unspoken pain and her own childish anxieties, now bloomed vibrantly, a testament to her resilient spirit. "Your hair's a mess, artist," he teased gently, stepping carefully over scattered paper towels and discarded brushes. "I'm experimenting with chaos, Dad," she replied without looking up, her voice brimming with artistic absorption. He sat beside her, simply enjoying her quiet, focused presence, the balm it brought to his soul. "How's it going, mija?" She glanced sideways, brushing her bangs with the back of her wrist, leaving a tiny streak of blue paint across her forehead. "Miss Tam says my work has emotion now." She asked what changed. Miguel smiled, anticipating her answer. "And what did you say?" "That my dad started telling the truth out loud again," she replied, her eyes meeting his, bright and knowing, a profound insight into his internal journey. He swallowed hard, caught off guard by her profound perception, a child's unwavering understanding. Then she handed him a folded piece of paper, her small hand warm against his. "What's this?" "A contest. It's a student-parent showcase for the community center. They want a written story paired with visual art. I thought maybe we could do it together, Dad." Miguel opened the form, scanning the deadline, a faint, almost disbelieving smile touching his lips. A written story. It had been so long since he'd penned anything outside of academic or legal texts. "I don't know, Camilla. I haven't written anything that wasn't buried in footnotes or dense technical jargon in a very, very long time." She grinned, her eyes sparkling with hope and a profound, unwavering belief in him. "Then maybe it's time someone read what you really think, Dad. What you really feel. What your heart has been whispering all these years." He looked at her innocent yet powerful hope, her fierce hunger for his authentic self, her unwavering faith in him. And for the first time in years, he felt a genuine, profound readiness. Ready to speak, ready to write, ready to create, with his name attached, not hidden. The unseen architect of truth, the quiet guardian of language, was finally ready to emerge from the shadows, not for himself, but for her, for their shared story. Later that night, long after the last dish was washed and put away, Miguel sat alone at the kitchen table. The apartment was hushed, the silence broken only by the distant, rhythmic hum of the city, a low, constant drone that had become the ambient soundtrack to his solitude. The student-parent showcase form, given to him by Camilla, lay open before him. Its simple, innocent lines somehow seemed more intimidating than any complex, multi-layered contract he'd ever faced in his previous life, its blank spaces challenging him in a deeply personal way. He reached for his leather journal, the worn personal one, now a repository of his deepest thoughts and nascent courage, a chronicler of his quiet transformation. He flipped to a fresh, unmarked page, and, with a new sense of quiet purpose that had been steadily gaining momentum, he picked up his pen. He wrote, his hand moving with a familiar, steady rhythm of introspection. Sometimes the war isn't fought with fists or votes or money. Sometimes it's won when someone finally listens to the one man who never raised his voice, but whose truth resonated anyway. He closed the book gently, but not the story that was still unfolding, not the quiet transformation that was steadily gaining momentum within him. The headline dropped on a Tuesday morning, not with a quiet whisper, but like a clap of thunder in a quiet room, reverberating through the financial news cycles and the corporate world. Bionova executive resigns amid contract scandal. Internal source prevents billion-dollar breach. The article, meticulously researched and expertly written, detailed Eric Shaw's abrupt and ignominious termination, painted him as the architect of a deliberate, intricate web of deception that had nearly cost Bionova dearly, financially and reputationally. It didn't name Miguel, of course. His anonymity, painstakingly guarded, was still technically preserved. But the phrasing, internal source with unparalleled linguistic and legal fluency, a unique understanding of cross-border biotech agreements, a quiet guardian of corporate integrity, was enough. It was enough to spark whispers, then murmurs, then outright, cautious conversations in every corner of the sprawling company, from the mailroom to the executive floors. For the first time in years, the janitor with the quiet eyes, the unassuming figure in the navy blue uniform, wasn't invisible. He was suspected. He was a known unknown. And yet, no one confronted him directly. There was no finger pointing in the hallways, no direct questions fired at him during his rounds. Just nods that lasted a fraction of a second too long, glances held with an unsettling intensity, and animated conversations that abruptly stopped, dying into awkward silence whenever he entered the break room. There was a strange, cautious reverence in the air, given not to an overt hero, but to someone people didn't quite know how to thank, didn't quite know how to categorize or even address. He was an enigma, a walking secret, a living testament to unseen brilliance, a catalyst for massive change from the most unexpected quarter. The weight of this new kind of visibility, however indirect, however unspoken, pressed down on him, a heavy mantle. Veronica found him later that day in the archive room, a dusty, cavernous space filled with rows of ancient, bound print contracts, forgotten histories meticulously organized in brittle paper. He sat cross-legged on the floor, meticulously sifting through old documents like they were pieces of an intricate, unsolved puzzle, his face illuminated by the dim, flickering overhead light, a faint sheen of dust on his brow. "You're not required to do this, Miguel," she said softly from the doorway, her voice echoing slightly in the vast, quiet room. Miguel didn't look up immediately, his concentration absolute, his fingers gently tracing an old, faded clause. "I know, but these are the ghost stories of corporation, Veronica. They teach you a lot about what went wrong and why." She walked in, her heels, usually so pronounced against the polished floors, now strangely quiet against the linoleum, a testament to her deliberate intention not to disturb. She sat beside him without asking, her elegant, tailored suit a stark contrast to his utilitarian uniform and the swirling dust motes dancing in the air. "There's something about ink on paper," he said, finally looking at her, a faint smudge of ancient ink on his cheek. "It's honest. You can't delete it. You can't change it with a click. You either meant what you wrote or you didn't. The truth, however inconvenient, is stark and immutable." Veronica picked up a particularly thick, yellowed contract, scanned a line of archaic legalese, then looked at him, her eyes searching. "You know what they're saying about you, don't you, Miguel? The whispers about the anonymous translator." Miguel shrugged, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I've been the janitor for 11 years, Veronica. Silence doesn't scare me, and whispers are just a louder, more frantic kind of silence, easily ignored." She nodded, her gaze empathetic, seeing beyond his stoicism. "But visibility does, doesn't it? Even this indirect kind. The scrutiny, the expectations." He paused, carefully turning a brittle page, his brow furrowed in thought. "It's not the spotlight I fear, Veronica. It's the shadows that follow it. The things you expose about others, the people you inevitably disappoint or offend when you stop being invisible, when you force them to see unpleasant truths." His words resonated with a profound understanding of human nature and the complexities of power. Veronica was quiet for a moment, absorbing his words, a rare understanding dawning on her, recognizing the burden of his unique perspective. Then she reached into her elegant, designer handbag and pulled out a sealed envelope, pristine white against the faded paper of the archives, a stark symbol of the present against the past. Inside was a check. Miguel opened it, his eyes widening in disbelief at the figure, and immediately began to shake his head. "No," he said firmly, his voice quiet but resolute, pushing the envelope gently back towards her. This isn't necessary. This isn't what I wanted or why I did it." "It's earned," Veronica replied, her voice unwavering, her hand pushing the envelope back. "Not a bonus, not a reward. You said once, in jest, 'Translate this and my salary is yours.' I said it as a joke. You answered it with your integrity, your brilliance, your sacrifice, and you saved my company. So this is me, honoring the line, honoring the truth of your invaluable contribution." Miguel looked down at the paper. $400,000, more than he'd earned in the last 8 years combined, a sum that could fundamentally alter his and Camilla's lives. He blinked once, twice, the sheer enormity of the sum almost overwhelming. And then, gently, reverently, he folded the check back into its envelope. "I don't need charity, Veronica, and I don't want to be bought." Veronica didn't flinch. Her expression remained firm, unwavering. "And this isn't charity, Miguel. It's accountability. Mine. For my oversight, for our company's blindness, for the debt we owe you." They sat in silence for a long moment, the unspoken weight of the past, the startling reality of the present, and the potential of the future hanging between them. Then Veronica added, her voice softer, almost tentative, a genuine human connection breaking through her executive composure. "Now, there's more. I'd like to offer you a position, a role that fully utilizes your extraordinary talents." He didn't react, his face a mask of careful neutrality, betraying nothing of the internal turmoil. "Our international division is being completely rebuilt, from the ground up," she continued. her voice gaining momentum as she outlined a bold, proactive vision for the future. We're moving toward entirely in-house linguistic auditing, a proactive, preventative approach to risk management. No more outsourced guesswork, no more relying on incomplete internal reviews. I want you to lead it, Miguel, to design it, to be its architect, to build a system that can never be compromised by hidden words again. Miguel finally turned to her, his gaze penetrating, assessing, weighing the profound implications of her offer. You want a janitor with a dead past, a man who explicitly chose obscurity, to head your global compliance and linguistic integrity division, Veronica? I want the one man in this company who saw the truth before anyone else did, she countered, her voice firm, clear, radiating absolute conviction. The one man who wasn't afraid to speak it, however quietly. The man who saved Bionova. His past isn't dead, Miguel. It's foundational. It's the crucible that forged the invaluable perspective you possess today. She held his gaze for a long moment, an unspoken challenge and an immense trust shining in her eyes. Then he said, his voice low, imbued with a deep, personal history. You don't know everything about me, Veronica. There are parts of my past that are complicated. I'm not offering this because I know everything, she replied, her voice firm, unwavering, cutting through his self-doubt. I'm offering it because I know enough. I know your integrity. I know your capacity for truth, for meticulousness, for seeing what others overlook. And I know your quiet courage. That is more than enough. That evening, Miguel sat with Camilla at their kitchen table. The check rested between them, pristine white, utterly untouched, a potent symbol of a crossroads. She stared at it, wide-eyed, her breath catching in a hushed whisper. Dad, this could change everything. Everything. Her voice was filled with a child's boundless dreams, a glimpse into a future of possibilities. He nodded, his own heart thrumming with the enormity of it, the dizzying implications. I know, Mija. It really could. You could finally get us out of here, she continued, her excitement bubbling, painting a vivid picture. Maybe even go back to teaching, or write your own books, or take that incredible job if you wanted. You could be Dr. Alvarez again. Her eyes pleaded with him, mirroring his own deepest, most suppressed desires for a return to intellectual purpose. Miguel smiled at her, a profound warmth spreading through him, radiating from his heart. And what would you do, Mija, with all that change, with a new apartment, new possibilities? Camilla grinned, her face alight, her vision clear. I'd buy every single color of watercolor they sell at Michael's, Dad, all of them. And maybe one of those fancy sketch tablets with a digital pen, like the pros use. Her dreams were simple, yet vibrant. He chuckled, a genuine, heartfelt sound that echoed in the small kitchen. Big dreams, huh? I learned from the best, she replied, her words innocent and sincere, warming him deeper than the lentil soup steaming between them. Then she said, her voice dropping to a more serious, tender tone, her intuition once again piercing his emotional defenses. Why are you hesitating, Dad? I can feel it. He looked at her, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under her unwavering gaze, under her profound understanding. Because for so long I built my entire life on staying small, Camilla. On being invisible, on being safe, on protecting what little I had left. And now that the door's open, now that there's a chance to step back into that other life, I don't know who I am when I walk through it. I don't know if I can be that man again, the Dr. Alvarez of before, or if I even want to. Camilla reached out across the table, her small hand covering his, a gesture of profound comfort and unwavering understanding. Her touch was an anchor. You're my dad, she said, her voice soft but certain. That's always been more than enough, and you'll always be you, no matter what door you walk through. You'll just be more of you. Her simple, unwavering faith was a lighthouse in his storm of uncertainty, a guiding star in his confusion. His daughter, his anchor, his greatest teacher, had once again shown him the way forward. The quiet ascent was poised to transform into a rebirth. The next morning, the sprawling city of Chicago was dressed in a crisp, invigorating breeze that tugged playfully at loose collars and sent discarded autumn leaves skittering across sidewalks, a lively dance against the cold stone. Miguel met with Veronica on the rooftop terrace of Bionova, a quiet, almost secluded place that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the metropolis, beneath them a vast, intricate tapestry of steel, glass, and human endeavor. Few employees ever used this elevated sanctuary, preferring the climate-controlled comfort of their offices. The wind tugged playfully at Miguel's collar, a symbolic release from the constricting uniform. Veronica's hair, usually held in a severe, professional chignon, danced freely in the breeze, untamed for once, a reflection of the unburdened conversation they were about to have. This was not a boardroom, not a formal office, but neutral ground, a space for raw honesty and profound negotiation. He handed her the check, the pristine white envelope that contained $400,000, a life-changing sum that represented years of hard, unseen labor and sacrifice. "I'm not taking this, Veronica." His voice was firm, resolute, devoid of any pretense of false humility or a desire to negotiate for more. It was a statement of principle. She opened her mouth to protest, a flicker of exasperation and disbelief in her sharp eyes, but he raised a hand, a gesture that silently commanded attention, gentle yet firm. "Not because it's not fair. It is. It's more than fair, and I appreciate the gesture profoundly. But because there's something more valuable you can give me. Something I need more than money. Something I need for Camilla and for myself." Veronica's brows lifted, a spark of intrigued curiosity in her gaze, her executive mind instantly recognizing the profound weight of a non-monetary request. "Name it, Miguel. Anything within my power, and within reason, I assure you." "An offer that doesn't turn me into a corporate poster boy for your PR machine," he began, his voice low, clear, and direct, sketching the boundaries of his terms. "A job that lets me work, if I choose, in the shadows, where I'm most effective, unburdened by the demands of public visibility. Privacy, purpose, and one more thing." He paused, his gaze meeting hers, holding it with unwavering intensity, injecting profound meaning into his final condition. "No more jokes at the expense of the invisible people in this company. Not just me or my janitorial team, but anyone who works unseen, anyone whose labor is often overlooked or dismissed. No more casual dismissals, no more thoughtless disrespect for the dignity of all work." Veronica's throat moved as she swallowed, a subtle, visible acknowledgement of the profound weight of his request and the deep, systemic truth it held. It wasn't about money. It was about dignity, about systemic cultural change, about valuing every human contribution. "You have my word, Miguel, on all counts, and I will ensure it becomes a core principle of this company's culture." She extended her hand, not as a superior to an employee, but as an equal, a colleague forged in shared crisis and mutual respect. He shook it, a firm, deliberate clasp, sealing the pact. No press cameras, no grand applause, no public fanfare, just a quiet, powerful agreement between two people who'd once stood on opposite sides of a locked door, separated by status and perception, and had finally, together, chosen to open it, bridging a chasm. That night, back in the quiet sanctuary of his apartment, Miguel pulled his old university briefcase out of the closet. It was dusty, its once pristine leather now softened and worn by years of use and neglect, a relic from a former life he had carefully packed away. Inside, tucked carefully behind a forgotten exam rubric, a stack of yellowed lecture notes, and a few outdated academic conference programs, he found a folded photograph. It was a cherished, slightly faded picture of Sophia, radiant and smiling, holding a tiny, gurgling baby Camilla in her arms, her eyes full of boundless love and a future that never fully materialized. He stared at it for a long while, the images flooding his mind with bittersweet memories, a profound wave of grief and gratitude. Then, placing the photo gently on his desk, beside his worn lexicon journal, a symbol of his reawakened intellect, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I think I'm ready now, Sophia. Ready to try again. Ready to live for both of us and for our daughter." And for the first time in over a decade, he meant it, truly and deeply. The quiet promise, made to himself and to the beloved ghost of his wife, settled like a profound peace in his heart, a quiet determination to forge a new path. The next morning, the air at Bayanova was different. Miguel Alvarez adjusted the sleeves of his grey shirt, still simple, still clean, but noticeably no longer part of a uniform. It was an unspoken statement, a subtle badge of his new role. He wasn't mopping floors this morning. He was walking into a room full of people with important titles, people who had once walked past him without a second glance, unaware of the brilliance they were overlooking. And for the first time in over a decade, he was the one they waited for. His gait was steady, purposeful, imbued with a quiet confidence that was newfound yet deeply earned. His new workspace on the 37th floor was modest, intentionally so, reflecting his terms. No ostentatious gold plaques, no oversized glass desks designed for corporate power plays, just a thoughtfully designed room with clean lines, abundant natural light streaming through large windows, and 2 massive whiteboards already half filled with complex terms in 6 different languages, a vibrant tapestry of linguistic and legal challenges. At the center sat a long, sturdy table where language met law, where meticulous analysis would now safeguard Bionova's future. His name wasn't on the door. That was intentional, a core part of his pact with Veronica, a silent nod to his desire for a certain kind of operational invisibility, a shield for his private life. But the ergonomic chair at the head of the table that was his now, a tangible symbol of his leadership. Veronica had honored every single word of their agreement, a testament to her newfound integrity and respect. There was no publicity, no press release trumpeting his arrival, no grand announcement that would turn him into a corporate poster boy, exposed to public scrutiny. His new title was deliberately vague, almost unassuming: contractor, linguistic integrity advisor. But the work was anything but vague. It was sharp, crucial, deeply impactful, and carried immense responsibility. He reviewed every international contract before it reached executive eyes, not just for grammar, legal boilerplate, or even obvious risks, but for danger, for the hidden traps, the subtle misrepresentations, the insidious linguistic nuances that could compromise the company's integrity and future. He saved them twice in the first week alone, spotting cleverly concealed ambiguities that would have led to significant, costly legal battles or disastrous compliance breaches, quiet victories that only a handful of senior people in Bionova would ever know. His work was the unseen foundation of their renewed trust. That afternoon, as Miguel refilled his coffee mug in the executive lounge space he now occupied with a quiet, undeniable ease, a man perfectly at home in a world that once ignored him, he spotted Veronica across the room. She stood alone at the panoramic window, phone in one hand, her expression unreadable as always, gazing out at the bustling city he now helped protect in a new, profound way. He hesitated for a moment, then walked toward her, a comfortable familiarity now present between them. "I have to admit," he said softly, a hint of his dry, understated humor in his voice, "this is by far the quietest promotion I've ever seen. Veronica, perhaps the quietest in corporate history." Veronica looked up, a slight, genuine smile tugging at the edge of her mouth, her eyes crinkling in amusement. "You asked for quiet, Miguel. I delivered. And then some." He raised an eyebrow playfully, a touch of gentle challenge. "I didn't ask for invisible, Veronica. Just quiet. There's a difference." She sipped her tea, her gaze thoughtful, reflective. "You're not invisible anymore, Miguel. Not truly. Not here. Not to the people who matter, who now rely on you." He looked around the sleek, modern lounge, filled with a subdued hum of executive conversation. "Some days I'm not sure what I am, Veronica," he confessed, a rare moment of introspection allowed. "A ghost in a grey shirt, perhaps." Veronica turned to him fully, her voice calm but direct, radiating a newfound clarity and conviction that had been refined by his presence. "You're the man, Miguel, who reminds us all that excellence doesn't always wear a flashy title. That silence isn't absence. It's often precision. It's profound attention. It's integrity. You are the moral compass we didn't know we needed." Miguel blinked, surprised by the profound depth of her words, a quiet flush spreading across his cheeks. Then he nodded slowly, a genuine appreciation in his eyes. "That's a good line, Veronica. A very good line." "I borrowed it," she replied, a genuine warmth and shared understanding in her eyes. "From something you said your first day here, to Camilla, about when to be quiet." He chuckled, a soft, rich sound that seemed to fill the quiet lounge. "So now you're quoting me back to myself, using my own words against me?" Veronica smiled, a full, open smile that rarely reached her executive demeanor. "Only the best line, Miguel. Only the best." They needed to be heard again. The understanding between them deepened, a silent, powerful bond built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and a profound appreciation for truth. The quiet ascent had not only transformed Miguel's life, but had also begun to subtly, yet fundamentally, reshape the very culture of Bionova, all guided by the unseen architect. That weekend, Miguel and Camilla sat cross-legged on the living room floor, their backs against the comfortable, worn couch. Between them, a giant poster board lay spread out, a blank canvas for their shared creativity, surrounded by an array of watercolor sets, a tangle of colored pencils and scattered sketches. "I still don't know why you want me to be the writing half of this project, mija," Miguel said, a hint of genuine modesty in his voice, despite his newly rekindled academic prowess. Camilla grinned, her face alight with an infectious enthusiasm. Because your stories are better than my dialogue. Dad, you make words feel things. He pointed at her vibrant fox sketch, its eyes soulful and wise. And your fox has more emotion than half the characters in corporate boardrooms. She beamed, delighted by his praise. So, what should our theme be? She asked eagerly. Miguel thought for a moment, then slowly, deliberately, wrote at the top of the poster board, his pen sketching elegant script, "What you don't see." Camilla read it aloud, her voice soft with understanding. "That's powerful, Dad. It's perfect." He looked at her, his eyes warm. "It's everything I've ever been, Mija, and everything I'm becoming." They worked in companionable silence for a while, father and daughter building a story that blended colors and words, shadows and light, the seen and the unseen. Miguel wrote a short, poignant passage about a janitor who once taught 5 languages, a man who found strength in silence, and a child who, with her unwavering belief, taught him how to speak again, how to truly live. Camilla, in turn, drew a pair of shoes, one small, delicate, adorned with a tiny butterfly, the other large, sturdy, with laces worn smooth by countless miles. They walked side by side along a cracked sidewalk that, in her imagination, bloomed with wild flowers, defying the concrete. The following week, Veronica asked Miguel to join her at a quiet, unassuming lunch spot near the Bionova office. No suits, no files, no corporate pretense, just 2 people, a shared table, and a conversation that went beyond the immediate demands of business. She handed him a slim folder. "What's this?" he asked, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "An advisory contract," she replied, her voice low, steady, a hint of something deeper in her gaze. "Longer term, fully remote if you want it, better pay, better hours, more flexibility. A different kind of role entirely." Miguel raised an eyebrow, a silent question. "Why me again, Veronica? Why push this?" Veronica leaned in, her voice softening, losing its corporate edge. "Because in a world full of voices shouting for attention, Miguel, you listened for what others missed. And then you acted not to be seen, but to protect. That kind of integrity doesn't come with a degree. It comes with character. It comes from deep within." He didn't answer right away, his gaze thoughtful. Then he said, "I'll think about it." She nodded. "Take your time." But he added, a subtle, unwavering condition. "Only if the first line in the contract reads, 'No jokes at the expense of the invisible people.' A formal commitment to the cultural shift we discussed." Veronica smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. Already added, "Miguel, it's a non-negotiable clause now." That night, Camilla finished her project and carefully slid it into a manila folder, her face glowing with pride. As Miguel turned off the kitchen light, preparing for bed, she stopped him. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah, mija?" She hesitated, then said, her voice soft but profound. "I used to think being small meant being unimportant. But now I think being small just means you fit into places other people don't even notice. And sometimes, Dad, that's where the real work happens. The most important work." Miguel looked at her with eyes full of quiet awe, his heart swelling. "You're not just growing, Mija," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're blooming, fully and beautifully." She laughed, a sound like chimes. "Well, you're finally watering yourself, too, Dad." He smiled, and for the first time, he believed her. He truly, deeply believed her. Later, as the city exhaled into dusk, its lights beginning to glitter like scattered diamonds, Miguel sat by the window with his old leather journal. He flipped to a fresh page and wrote, his hand steady, reflecting a profound inner peace. Some doors don't need to be kicked open. Some just need a quiet knock, and someone brave enough to walk through when they finally open. He closed the journal. Outside, Camilla taped their art project proudly on the fridge, a simple act of celebration. And in that simple act, a child celebrating a father, Miguel Alvarez was seen fully and finally for exactly who he had always been. It was raining softly that night, not the angry, lashing kind of rain, but the quiet, thoughtful kind that seems to listen while it falls, washing the world clean. Miguel sat on the apartment balcony, legs stretched out, journal open across his knees. Inside, Camilla was watching an old documentary about endangered languages, her latest intellectual curiosity. Every so often, he heard her mutter something in Spanish, then repeat it in English, then sketch a small image beside the phrase in her notebook. He smiled, a profound warmth in his chest. She had inherited more than just his eyes. She had inherited his love for words, his quiet intensity. He ran his fingers over the sentence he had just written in his journal. Legacy isn't about being remembered. It's about what you pass along without needing to be. He paused, then crossed it out. Something still didn't feel quite full, quite complete. The knock came around 9:15 p.m., soft but deliberate. Miguel opened the door to find Veronica standing there. Her umbrella was folded, rain still beating on her coat collar, a wisp of untamed hair escaping. "You said no surprises," he said, genuinely surprised, a wry smile touching his lips. "I lied," she replied, a small, knowing smile playing on her own lips. He stepped aside, and she walked in, her eyes scanning the small, warm space filled with Camilla's vibrant drawings and the comforting scent of cinnamon tea. Camilla looked up from the couch, her face breaking into a wide smile. "Miss Veronica," Veronica grinned. "Hey, artist, I hear your dad's collaborating with a genius." Camilla blushed and ran to her room, mumbling something about final touches to her project. Miguel raised an eyebrow at Veronica. "Everything okay?" Veronica nodded. "Actually, I just came from a board dinner. They asked me to speak about leadership. I started writing a speech. Then I stopped because I realized everything I wanted to say, everything truly meaningful about leadership, I already heard someone else say better." He folded his arms, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I'm not giving speeches, Veronica." "I know," she said, her gaze soft, direct. "But maybe you've been giving one this whole time, Miguel. Just by showing up. Just by being you." They sat at the kitchen table. Veronica pulled out her phone and tapped it once. "I recorded something. Not for the board. For me." She hit play. It was Miguel's voice, recorded from a training session earlier that week with the compliance team. His words, clear and resonant, filled the small room. Language is more than translation. It's trust. It's the promise that what you say I will carry carefully, and what I say you'll hear without distortion. Miguel stared at the phone, a flush rising on his face. "I didn't know you recorded that." "I didn't want to forget it," Veronica said softly, her eyes holding his. A pause. She looked at him then, not as an executive, not even as a colleague, but as a woman who had been watching quietly, learning profoundly. "I think," she said, her voice catching slightly, "that for a long time I mistook control for clarity. But you, Miguel," her voice softened further, "you taught me that stillness doesn't mean uncertainty. Sometimes it just means listening. Truly listening." Miguel didn't respond right away. Then he said, "You once asked me if I wanted to do more." She nodded. He looked around their small kitchen, the crooked cabinet, the light bulb that flickered every third evening, then at her, at the way her hands had relaxed, at the way she wasn't trying to fill the silence anymore. "I don't want more," he said, his voice quiet, almost vulnerable. "I want real. I want authentic. This." She met his eyes, and this time she didn't fill the silence either. Later that night, after Veronica had left, Miguel tucked Camilla into bed. "Did you like the visit?" he asked. Camilla nodded. She smiled more tonight. "Dad, I think she's been learning how." "From you?" he chuckled. "Maybe a little from both of us," she said, pulling the blanket up to her chin. "Dad?" "Yeah, mija? I don't think I've ever seen you this happy." Miguel paused, then knelt beside her, brushing a curl from her cheek. "It's not happiness, mija. It's peace, and that took me a long time to earn." 2 days later, Camilla and Miguel stood before the community center auditorium, waiting for their names to be called. Parents and children filled the seats, a sea of expectant faces. Art projects lined the walls like vibrant windows into other worlds. The Mick tapped the mic. "Next up, we have a joint entry from Camilla Alvarez and her father, Miguel Alvarez. Their piece is titled What You Don't See." Camilla squeezed Miguel's hand, her small fingers warm and reassuring. "Ready," he whispered. "No," she grinned, her eyes sparkling. "But let's do it anyway." They walked on stage, Camilla beginning, her voice clear and confident. "This is a story about a janitor who used to be a professor and a girl who used to think she had to be loud to be seen." Laughter, light applause. Miguel continued, his voice resonant with newfound purpose. "It's about what happens when words stop being weapons and start becoming bridges. It's about the power of truth, even when whispered." They read their piece short, simple, full of heart. A story about silence and truth, about loss and rediscovery, about how some people find the courage to speak, and others find the courage to listen. When they finished, the room was still, captivated. Then the applause came, not thunderous, but warm, sustained, deeply felt. Afterward, as they walked out under the soft glow of street lamps, Camilla said, That was better than I expected. Miguel smiled. Good things usually are. That night, as the city fell asleep around them, Miguel sat at his desk, journal open. He didn't write much, just one line. When words become feelings and feelings become actions, that's when a life begins to mean something. He underlined it once, then softly closed the book. 1 year later, the office on the top floor of Bionova had changed. The layout was the same clean line, warm wood, tall windows that framed the city skyline like a painting, but the energy was different, quieter, more human. There was laughter in the hallways now, not forced, not nervous, but real, the kind that comes when people feel safe, respected, and truly valued. And at the heart of it all sat Miguel Alvarez. His office was tucked at the end of the hallway, behind a frosted glass door that bore no grandiose title, just a simple, elegant placard, Linguistic Integrity Office. But on the inside of his desk drawer, tucked carefully under a notepad and his worn leather journal, was a gift he hadn't yet mounted, a nameplate crafted from polished wood. Engraved on it were the words, Dr. Miguel Alvarez, Director of International Linguistics and Cultural Affairs. Beneath it, a small, handwritten note from Veronica. Your choice whether to use this. Either way, you are seen now. He ran a finger over the engraving sometimes. Not often, just enough to remind himself that recognition didn't need to be loud to be real. That afternoon, Camilla stopped by the office after school, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a stack of papers clutched in her hand. You're late, Miguel teased as she dropped onto the couch. You're early, she countered, smirking playfully. He raised an eyebrow. Touché. She handed him the papers, her eyes gleaming. Our story got published in the district journal, and they want us to speak at next month's literacy event. Miguel scanned the pages, his voice softening as he read the opening line again. Not all heroes wear badges. Some just carry keys and keep the lights on after everyone else has gone home. He looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. You wrote that, mija. I felt that, Dad, Camilla replied, more serious now. You lived it. He smiled. Maybe we both did. That evening, they walked to the community garden together, a weekly ritual now. Camilla watered the foxgloves and marigolds while Miguel meticulously pruned the wild mint creeping toward the tomato rows. It had become their sacred place of peace, of growth not just for plants, but for hearts long silent. As they worked in companionable quiet, Veronica arrived, unannounced, carrying a picnic basket and a folded blanket. You're late, Miguel called out, a genuine smile on his face. She grinned. She gets it from me, she said, gesturing to Camilla. They laid the blanket near the ancient peach tree and passed around sandwiches and fruit. Camilla sprawled on her stomach, sketching something furiously while the adults sipped coffee from thermoses. Remember the first time we sat under this tree? Veronica asked, her voice soft. Miguel nodded. You brought files. I brought skepticism and a lot of unspoken grief. She laughed softly. You also brought the best contract edits our team had ever seen. He looked at her, quieter now, a profound gratitude in his eyes. You saw me, Veronica, before I was ready to be seen. That mattered more than anything. Veronica met his gaze, her own eyes reflecting the setting sun. You taught me to look, Miguel, to truly look beyond the surface. A long pause. Then she said, You ever going to hang that nameplate? Miguel smiled. I like knowing it's there. But truth be told, I like earning it more every single day. As the sun dipped behind the city skyline, painting the clouds in fiery hues of orange and purple, Miguel watched Camilla chasing fireflies near the garden fence, her laughter lifting into the golden light. He turned to Veronica, his voice low, imbued with a deep, quiet contentment. You know what I've learned most this year, Veronica? She leaned in, listening intently. What, Miguel? That healing doesn't look like fireworks or grand gestures. It looks like trust built slowly, quietly, one honest moment at a time. She nodded. And love? Miguel glanced at her hand, then slowly, tentatively, reached for it, his fingers interlacing with hers. No performance, no fear, just raw, unadorned connection. Love, he said, his voice a soft, steady whisper. Looks like showing up even when you have every reason to run. It looks like choosing to be seen. She squeezed his hand gently, and in that shared silence, everything unspoken was profoundly understood. Later that night, after Camilla had fallen asleep in the car ride home and Veronica had shared a quiet, lingering kiss on Miguel's cheek before heading upstairs to her own apartment, Miguel stood alone at the kitchen counter. He opened the drawer, pulled out the nameplate. He stared at it for a long moment, then gently, reverently, placed it on the bookshelf beside his old, framed teaching certificate and Camilla's first published story. He didn't need the world to know. He needed to know that he believed it now, that he had lived through the darkness and chosen to return to the light, not for applause, not for external validation, but for legacy. For her, for them, for the quiet voice inside that had waited so patiently to be heard, to be honored. To those who've ever felt unseen, your value does not diminish in silence. Your truth does not expire in shadow. And one day, when you least expect it, someone will look at you with eyes that finally see. And in that moment, everything will begin again. Miguel closed the journal, set it gently beside the nameplate, and turned off the light. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths, and sometimes the ones we overlook are the ones who save us all. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to know where you are watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how far stories like this can travel. And if you believe the world needs more stories of kindness, redemption, and quiet courage, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. Your support helps these stories reach someone who might need them today. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for spending your time here. Until next time, keep believing in the quiet power of truth.